Chapter 3771. After all, in the world of cultivation, there was no such thing as fairness, artificially creating a fair environment. But in the end, the people that were selected would have to face a completely unfair and cruel world. Tragedies often occurred in this way. But in the eyes of a powerful figure like Shanghai Tianhua, it was similar to the cruel and primitive competition of 10 dogs that could truly select the most promising newcomers. If 10 puppies were thrown into the cave and killed each other, the last one to survive would definitely be the strongest one. This was the law of nature, cruel and simple, but extremely effective. However, although Shanghai Tianhua felt disdain towards the suggestions of the Council of Elders, as the high and mighty pavilion master of the Soaring Sky Pavilion, he could not possibly interfere in every matter, no matter how big or small. Otherwise, others would say that he was stretching his hand too far. The reason why he had spoken up this time was because these people were taking the rules of the trial too seriously. For the mighty Council of Elders to actually spend half a day discussing the rules of the welcoming pavilion, Shanghai Tianhua could not bear to watch any longer. That was why he had spoken up to reprimand them. Of course, this involved all sorts of behind-the-scenes games between the giants. Some people wanted to make a mountain out of a molehill and use this to expand their influence, but Shanghai Tianhua wanted to suppress these signs. There was no need for outsiders to know about all these things. Let's not talk about the games between the Elders Guild's higher-ups, but after Shanghai Tianhua spoke, at least there was no objection to this point. Without the protection of the corresponding rules, how to break this awkward stalemate would be left to the newcomers to solve themselves. Because of all sorts of concerns, the ordinary newcomers did not dare to take the initiative to challenge, but the truly powerful newcomers would definitely not be bound by such a small problem. Otherwise, if no one dared to break the stalemate, then it could only be said that this year's Welcome Pavilion did not have any strong people. At least, there is absolutely no peerless genius like the current Hall Master of the Law Enforcement Hall, Ramjia. As expected, the awkward stalemate did not last long. In less than half an incense stick of time, it was broken. And the first person to issue a challenge was unexpected, but reasonable. It was the Blue Cloud Pavilion's Meng Tong. Meng Tong was the first to take the stage. His invasive gaze slowly swept across the faces of every Blue Cloud Pavilion rookie. Every rookie that was swept by him would subconsciously shrink their necks, not daring to meet his gaze. This kind of domineering feeling that no one dared to challenge was something that Meng Tong had been dreaming of ever since he entered the Welcome Pavilion, but he had never been able to achieve it. What was being in the limelight? This was truly being in the limelight. Meng Tong couldn't help but let out a proud laugh. He was so arrogant that it was a complete mess. Why is this idiot so arrogant? If Boss Lin, he wasn't in the number 1 cave abode and couldn't take the initiative to challenge others, would it even be his turn? When there's no tiger in the mountain, the monkey becomes the king. Xiao Honkai cursed. Looking at the entire Blue Cloud Pavilion, there were only 2 people who had the strength to surpass the other rookies. One was Lin, the other was Meng Tong. As for the others like Xiao Ran and Li Zhengming, although they had a huge advantage in terms of strength when facing the other Blue Cloud Pavilion rookies, in the end, they were only Heaven Stage Full Circle. Even if they were stronger than other Heaven Stage Full Circle experts, they wouldn't be able to completely crush them. To put it bluntly, the only ones who had the absolute strength to crush the other Blue Cloud Pavilion rookies were Lin Yi and Meng Tong. Because the 2 of them had already successfully built their foundation, they were already completely above these Heaven Stage Full Circle newcomers. They could absolutely crush them one-on-one. That was a matter of course. And now, because Lin had swapped cave abodes with Xiao Ran, he took the initiative to jump into the pit and was unable to extricate himself. Then, the only one who had the capital to be in the limelight was Meng Tong. After all, the strength of an early-stage foundation building expert was right there. This was a fact that no matter how much Xiao Honkai disliked Meng Tong, it couldn't change. Listening to Xiao Hongsai's complaints, Lin Yi and the others looked at each other and smiled. This guy was at a disadvantage because he couldn't take the initiative to challenge Meng Tong, who had a lower ranking in the cave abodes. Otherwise, with his personality, he might be the first person to jump out and take the initiative to challenge Meng Tong. Let's see who this guy plans to challenge. If I'm not wrong, he should start with the two of you. Lin Yi speculated. Sure enough, before Lin Yi finished speaking, Meng Tong on the stage locked onto Xiao Ran, who was beside him, and said loudly with a disdainful and proud expression, "I, Meng Tong from Cave Abode number 15, challenge Xiao Ran from Cave Abode number 14. As soon as he said that, the other Blue Cloud Pavilion rookies clearly heaved a sigh of relief. Then, their gloating gazes all focused on Xiao Ran. Although strictly speaking, Meng Tong and them were all in Meng Jiuwang's faction, it was precisely because there were too many people in their faction that they didn't receive any benefits or care. Points were related to one's future. Meng Tong wouldn't give up, and neither would they. And if Meng Tong wanted to rise, he would have to step over their corpses in the end. This was unavoidable. However, before being stepped under Meng Tong's feet, being able to see Xiao Ran fall before them was still a delightful scene. Although he was already mentally prepared for this, when it really happened, Xiao Ran was still slightly stunned. Only then did he take a step towards the stage. Don't try too hard. Pay attention to protect yourself. It's not too late to get back at him after you reach Foundation Establishment. There's still a long way to go before the match. If you can't do it, just admit defeat. Lin Yi suddenly reminded him from behind. Although Xiao Ran was very strong, there was still a huge gap between him and an early-stage Foundation Establishment expert like Meng Tong. He had almost no chance of winning. However, Lin Yi wasn't worried that Xiao Ran would be so hot-blooded that he would fight to the death with Meng Tong. What he was worried about now was that Meng Tong would take the opportunity to kill Xiao Ran in the match. The nature of the challenge was actually equivalent to a duel. Although there were some emergency measures, it never avoided life and death. As the saying goes, fists and feet have no eyes. Life and death are fated. This was the natural rule of the arena. Even the welcoming pavilion, which had always been very protective of newcomers, was no exception. Just like the duel between newcomers, the challenge did not have any forbidden moves or other restrictions. Even if the opponent was killed on the stage, there would be no pursuit of any responsibility. However, there was one point. This kind of challenge clearly stated that no weapons could be used. After all, a divine weapon could greatly affect a person's strength. If a Heaven Stage Great Perfection newcomer suddenly took out a powerful divine weapon, it was even possible for him to challenge an early-stage Foundation Establishment expert. This was obviously unreasonable. After all, the welcoming pavilion needed powerful newcomers, not parasites that relied on divine weapons to survive. Chapter 3772. However, even without using weapons, with Meng Tong's current strength, if he really wanted to take the opportunity to kill Xiao Ran, he still had a great deal of confidence. Judging from the hostile position of both parties, the possibility of this happening was more than 90%. Since he couldn't deal with Lin Yi directly, then he would start with his underlings. This was the simplest logic. Listening to Lin Yi's reminder, Xiao Ran's body paused. Then he turned around and smiled. "I understand. I will protect myself." After saying that, Xiao Ran walked into the ring with his head held high. He didn't show any signs of nervousness, and his expression was as calm as water. It gave people the feeling that he was more confident than Meng Tong. Damn, this guy can't be like Lin, a person who hides his strength, right? Looking at Xiao Ran's behavior, Meng Tong couldn't help but mutter in his heart. In fact, as Lin Yi thought, Meng Jiuwang did give some instructions to Meng Tong beforehand. He told him to kill as much as possible when fighting against the two underlings of Lin Yi, Xiao Ran and Xiao Honkai. However, looking at the situation before him, Meng Tong couldn't help but feel a little guilty. Although they had been focusing on Lin Yi and ignored the two underlings, Xiao Ran and Xiao Honkai, don't forget that during the trial at the Back Mountain, they had fought against each other. At that time, Meng Tong hadn't succeeded in building his foundation, and Xiao Ran was exhausted by their numbers. However, his strange and mysterious shadow step left a deep impression on everyone. How could someone with such a body movement technique be an ordinary person. Although Meng Tong had always been arrogant, he wasn't so bad that he couldn't see through people. Otherwise, he wouldn't have made it to where he was today. Walking into the ring, Xiao Ran's expression was as calm as an ancient well. He stared back at Meng Tong without backing down. Although the aura around him was still calm and indifferent, if one were to carefully sense it, they would be able to sense the powerful battle intent hidden within. For a moment, the group of rookies who were gloating at the misfortune of others immediately shut their mouths. Like Meng Tong, they had more or less seen Xiao Ran's strength, at least during the trial at the back mountain. Other than being outnumbered and having to choose to escape, he was not at a disadvantage against them. He wasn't as pathetic as Xiao Honkai. Xiao Ran was a strong man, and while he wasn't a freak like Lin Yi, he wasn't a weakling that couldn't be done without. This was the consensus between the two. Looking at the stage, Xiao Ran was calm when facing Meng Tong. The rookies vaguely had a feeling that maybe Xiao Ran had no chance of winning. Tisk, you're just a weakling at heaven's stage great perfection. What are you pretending for? Of all the things you can learn, you have to learn from some idiot who doesn't know the immensity of heaven and earth. But since I'm in a good mood, I can teach you a lesson. Meng Tong suddenly sneered, but it's understandable. Your boss is the king of acting tough among rookies. He had already reacted. So what if Xiao Ran wasn't simple? As long as he hadn't built his foundation, he would never be his match. The only difference was that he had to spend more effort. Before Xiao Ran could speak, Xiao Honkai couldn't help but jump out to defend him. Rookie Ming, may I ask you, can you add another color on top of black? Adding another color to the pitch black surface, other than black, what else could you do? I'm not well educated, so don't lie to me. As soon as he finished speaking, the entire audience burst into laughter. When Meng Tong reacted, his face instantly turned the color of a pig's liver. I'm not well educated, so don't lie to me. Since you're not well educated, how did you become a heaven stage great perfection? Are you going to say that you can't even recognize words? If it weren't for the fact that he was standing in the ring, Meng Tong would have rushed over and trampled on Xiao Honkai. When his IQ was reduced to a laughingstock, even if he was an early-stage foundation establishment expert, what use was that? Lin Yi smiled and nodded at Xiao Honkai. This Xiao Honkai was still very courageous. He dared to speak his mind at the beginning, and it was the same now. As for Meng Jueguang and the others, they could only hold their foreheads speechlessly. Meng Tong was really useless. Fortunately, they didn't expect this guy to be able to deal with Lin Yi. Otherwise, they would really be blind. Meng Tong was helpless. He could only glare at Xiao Honkai, then turn to the referee, specially sent by the 3 pavilions to supervise the fairness. He suppressed his anger and said, "Sir referee, can we begin?" The referee was not a disciple of Blue Cloud Pavilion, but a disciple of Mysterious Pavilion who was specially assigned here to prevent under-the-table manipulation. Seeing this, he smiled nonchalantly and announced, "Both sides are ready. The first round of the newcomer challenge will now begin." Meng Tong immediately laughed sinisterly. The aura of an expert in the early stage of the foundation establishment realm was fully displayed. From the looks of it, he planned to go all out to kill Xiao Ran. He was prepared to kill to vent his anger. After all, there was an absolute suppression in their levels. No matter how powerful Xiao Ran was, facing an expert in the early stage of the foundation establishment realm who was going all out was still quite dangerous. It would not be an exaggeration to say that the odds were against Xiao Ran. However, Meng Tong summoned his monstrous aura. Before he could make a move, Xiao Ran turned to the referee and said 3 words calmly, "I give up. Fuck." Meng Tong almost couldn't catch his breath. His body instantly felt a stab of pain, and he was about to spit out a mouthful of blood. The audience was in an uproar. They looked at each other in disbelief. He acted like an expert for a long time. Not only did he tease Meng Tong, but even the surrounding newcomers were looking forward to it. In the end, he just said, "I give up. Are you fucking kidding me?" This time, not only Meng Tong and the others were stunned, but even Lin Yi and the others did not expect it. Giving up was equivalent to admitting defeat. Xiao Ran never said he would do that. How can this be? Then, wouldn't Meng Tong have it easy? Xiao Honkai was dumbfounded. From his point of view, when facing trash like Meng Tong, even if he was not a match for him, he would definitely not let his opponent have it easy. Even if both sides were injured or even fought to the death, he would not hesitate. If Xiao Ran lost without a fight, how is that any different from surrendering to the enemy? Chapter 3773. Yes, according to the rules of the challenge, as long as one voluntarily gives up or admits defeat, the opponent cannot attack again. This way, Meng Tong will not have any chance to take advantage of him. But to be able to make such a decision directly, junior brother Zhao's courage is not small. The bitter senior brother also sighed. In a situation where he knew that his strength was not equal, it was obviously not wise to face Meng Tong head-on. But to take the initiative to admit defeat in front of everyone, this required great courage. If he hesitated even a little, perhaps blood would be spilled on the spot. After Xiao Ran finished speaking, everyone in the audience was stunned for a long time. Even the referee from the mysterious pavilion was stunned for a long time. Only then did he recover and announce, Xiao Ran of Cave 14 at the foot of the mountain has forfeited. This battle, Meng Tong of Cave 15 at the foot of the mountain has won. At least you know what's good for you. Otherwise, I would have long kicked you into minced meat. Meng Tong glared fiercely at Xiao Ran and sneered. Xiao Ran looked at him expressionlessly. Without saying a word, he turned around and walked off the stage. What welcomed him was a wave of boos from the other newcomers below the stage. However, all of a sudden, the hidden battle intent in his body grew stronger. Wait until after you build your foundation, then come and take care of this guy. Linny smiled and patted his shoulder. Yes. Xiao Ran nodded heavily. When he looked at Meng Tong on the stage again, his battle intent had already been restrained and once again returned to normal. But Lin Yi, who was familiar with him, knew that the idiot Meng Tong had already been targeted by an extraordinary guy. He did not even need to personally make a move. Perhaps not long after, there would be a brand new Xiao Ran who would challenge this guy. With Xiao Ran's foundation, even if Meng Tong took the lead in building his foundation in these few days. At that time, it would be very difficult to say who would win and who would lose. On the stage, Meng Tong did not come down immediately. According to the challenge rules, with his current position as the owner of Cave Abode number 14 at the foot of the mountain, other than Xiao Ran who was ranked lower, no one else could challenge him. However, he did not come down immediately. Instead, he stretched out a finger and pointed at Xiao Honkai who was standing beside Linny. It's your turn next. When the time comes, will you, the lumber waste, also learn to be a coward? I'll wait and see. Meng Tong laughed contemptuously and turned to leave the stage. Fuck, this idiot is so arrogant. Does he really think he's invincible just because he's in the early stage of foundation establishment? Just wait and see. Xiao Honkai clenched her fists. He was not Xiao Ran. Even if he knew that it was wiser to retreat in order to advance, even if he knew that retreating was the wiser way to advance, he couldn't take this lying down. Even if he knew he would lose, he would rather fight to the death with Meng Tong. He would never give up. Lin Yi and the bitter senior looked at each other and shook their heads helplessly. With Xiao Hongsai's upright personality, they couldn't persuade him even if they wanted to. But this was good. Letting him fight with Meng Tong, an early-stage foundation establishment expert. This kind of cross-stage combat would be very beneficial for him when he breaks through to foundation establishment. At that time, he just had to be careful not to be killed by Meng Tong. Blue Cloud Pavilion Newcomer Challenge. First round, first match. Although Meng Tong won without a fight, there was at least one thing that was beyond doubt. He did break the awkward deadlock, so that the other newcomers wouldn't be afraid to take the initiative to challenge him just because they were afraid of each other. As expected, a short moment after Meng Tong stepped down from the stage, a newcomer immediately issued a challenge. It was the owner of Cave number 12. Originally, if it wasn't for the scene that just happened and Meng Tong made a reservation for the next round, Xiao Honkai would definitely be the first to challenge him. But as a result, he really didn't plan to fight this round. After all, No matter how upright his personality was, he wouldn't be stupid enough to foolishly waste his true chi in the next round when he knew he was going to challenge someone stronger than him. That wasn't bravery, it was stupidity. However, the owner of cave number 12 was the first to go up the stage. This was more or less out of everyone's expectations. This was because this guy's name was Cha Wu. Although his strength had barely reached the peak of Heaven's stage, he was truly a weak newcomer. In the previous 2 rounds, he was the first to leave the stage in the first round, accumulating 1 point. In the second round, he challenged a peak late-stage Heaven stage, accumulating 10 points. In total, he had accumulated a total of 11 points from the 2 rounds, ranking last in the entire Blue Cloud Pavilion. This Cha Wu was called a weakling by others, and it was absolutely a well-deserved reputation. He actually dared to take the initiative to jump out after Meng Tong to issue a challenge. This inexplicable confidence was truly shocking. However, when he announced the party he was going to challenge, the audience suddenly burst into an uproar. Cave number 12, Cha Wu, challenges cave number 1, Lin. Cha Wu looked at Lin below the stage and shouted with full energy. Strange things happen every year, but there are especially many this year. Being challenged in public, Lin couldn't help but raise his eyebrows in surprise. A guy who could only be considered weak, even in the peak of Heaven's stage, actually dared to challenge him. Where did this guy get his courage and boldness from? Originally, according to his judgment, in this kind of one-on-one challenge round, probably only Meng Tong had the guts to challenge him. As long as the others had a little bit of brains, they shouldn't be stupid enough to take the initiative to run into the muzzle. He didn't expect such an accident to happen in the first round. Under everyone's gaze, Lin raised his leg and was about to go up the stage. However, before he went up the stage, he was stopped by Senior Brother Bitter Guy and said a few words. Junior Brother Lin, this is a rare good opportunity to advance by retreating. If you take the initiative to give up this round, you can immediately get cave number 12. This position is not only convenient for you to plunder points later, but you can also suppress Meng Tong at the same time, killing 2 birds with 1 stone. Senior Brother Bitter Guy said with a face full of excitement. The rules were laid out here. If Lin took the initiative to admit defeat to this weakling, although it sounded a little funny at first, discerning people could understand the meaning behind it. Although he lost 15 challenge points for a moment of forbearance, he gained a room to turn the situation around. With Lin Yi's formidable strength, as long as he was willing, he could completely fight his way up one cave after another. At that time, not to mention a mere 15 points, even earning 100 points would not be a problem. For Lin Yi, who was trapped in cave number 1 and unable to extricate himself, this weakling at the bottom of Blue Cloud Pavilion was simply a living bodhisattva who could save him from suffering. Such an opportunity was simply something that could not be asked for at any other time. With regards to Senior Brother Bitter Guy's suggestion, Lin Yi replied with a smile, did not say anything, and directly walked up the stage. Looking at Lin Yi going up the stage, there didn't seem to be any anger on his face. He didn't show any fighting intent, let alone any killing intent. Cha Wu couldn't help but laugh in his heart. Sure enough, it was just as he expected. Chapter 3774. This fellow, Lin Yi, was indeed powerful enough to make one's hair stand on end, but in order to show off to his lackeys, he foolishly trapped himself in the first cave abode at the foot of the mountain, unable to extricate himself. He had powerful strength, but no place to use it. If this carried on, the so-called number 1 rookie, Lin Yi, would be naturally wasted in the challenge round. If his biggest competitor, Meng Tong, was more cautious and did not take the initiative to challenge him, it was estimated that until the end of the challenge round, no one would take the initiative to give him points. In the end, he could only hold on to his pitiful starting points and end awkwardly. The first cave abode at the foot of the mountain corresponded to 15 starting points. To other rookies, it was quite a lot, but to Lin Yi, who had obtained full marks for the god level in 2 consecutive rounds, it was not even enough to fill the gaps between his teeth. He clearly had the powerful strength to crush everyone else, but he could only survive the entire challenge round in mediocrity. How could a person like Lin Yi, who always wanted to posture and be in the limelight, be willing to accept this? Even if one used their toes to think about it, one would be able to understand the grievance and depression involved. Of course, to Lin Yi, this was a deep pit of grievance and depression, but to the other rookies, it was an excellent opportunity. It all depended on whether they had the courage or not. When the discerning people knew that challenging Lin Yi was courting death, when the discerning people automatically ignored the number one rookie who had fallen into his own trap, suddenly a rookie jumped out to challenge him. Furthermore, this rookie's cave abode ranking was very low. What kind of situation would that be? How would Lin Yi react? Courting death? This was just a subconscious first reaction. Once they came to their senses, any normal person would definitely be able to see the opportunity. Lin Yi was naturally no exception. Thinking about it, as long as he took the initiative to lose the first round, he would definitely be able to earn more than 100 points in the following challenges. Who would be willing to miss such an opportunity? Once he missed it, it would be very difficult to have a second chance. Hence, with this line of thought, Cha Wu, who was considered the weakling among the Blue Cloud Pavilion rookies, suddenly realized that his opportunity had come. It had to be known that although it was not difficult for other rookies to think of this, the problem was that they might not have the courage to do so. Because even when they challenged Lin Yi was very sensible and cooperated with them to admit defeat. If they didn't have this strength, they still wouldn't be able to sit firmly in the number one cave abode at the foot of the mountain. Not only would they lose the opportunity to challenge. At that time, he would have to spit out the 15 points sooner or later, and it would be meaningless. However, it was meaningless to the other rookies, but for a weakling like Cha Wu, the significance was extraordinary. The reason was very simple. He was weak, and he had only obtained a pitiful 11 points in the first two rounds. If he continued to develop like this, it was almost inevitable that he would end up at the bottom of the rankings. Therefore, while the other rookies were still calculating the number of points, he had already sentenced himself to death in advance. Most of the time, a broken pot still needed capital, and this Cha Wu's capital could be said to be blessed by heaven. With his current situation, it was inevitable that he would end up in last place anyway. Now that things had come to this, it was meaningless to care about how many points he had. Instead, he might as well do something that would leave a deep impression on others. When the time came, he might be able to change his fate. For example, right now, when no one dared to challenge the number one rookie, Lin Yi, he dared to jump out. In the end, Lin Yi even took the initiative to admit defeat. If this matter were to be spread around, what kind of effect would it have? A person who forced a strong person like Lin Yi to take the initiative to admit defeat. If this unprecedented resume was spread, it would definitely be considered a domineering and cool person. When he entered the Blue Cloud Pavilion, normal people would have to look up to Cha Wu. To put it bluntly, in this challenge, he wasn't afraid that Lin Yi wasn't strong enough. He was afraid that Lin Yi wasn't strong enough. This was because the stronger Lin Yi was, the more this matter would become a brand, and the more Cha Wu would benefit from it. As a rookie, if he wanted to make a name for himself, the rookie assessment wasn't the only way. As long as he was flexible, he could rely on the shoulders of other strong rookies to rise. That was also a good choice. Regardless of the points, he would have the capital to brag about in the future. That was enough. Therefore, taking the initiative to challenge Lin Yi might seem unbelievable to the other rookies, but to Cha Wu, it was a heaven-sent opportunity. As long as Lin Yi's mind was normal like his little brother, Xiao Ran, and knew how to adapt to the circumstances, there would be at least a 90% chance of success. Not only would Lin Yi choose to cooperate with him, but Cha Wu also had another advantage. Before the start of the competition, Meng Jiuguang had gathered all the rookies together and told them something. It was an important countermeasure against Lin Yi's group, including Meng Tong. All 12 rookies did not have any restrictions when competing with each other. However, when facing Lin Yi's group, other than the challenge rules, Meng Jiuguang had specially added an internal rule. That was, among the 12 rookies, After any one of them challenged Lin Yi's group, the other 11 were not allowed to challenge that person for a week. Violators would be severely punished. This rule was equivalent to a one-sided attack on Lin Yi's group. The goal was self-evident. It was to encourage the rookies to challenge Lin Yi's group as much as possible. Even if they couldn't kill them, they had to tire them to death. And the rookies who challenged Lin, he could also obtain sufficient time to rest and recover. With this unspoken rule as a cover, Cha Wu's decision to challenge Lin, he became even more carefree and unscrupulous. When he successfully made Lin Yi admit defeat and occupy Cave Abode Number 1, the other rookies would not challenge him in a short period of time, be it for the sake of points or the additional unspoken rule of Meng Jiuguang. And for him, who aimed to obtain bragging rights, this was enough. Looking at Lin Yi's calm expression after getting on the stage, Cha Wu's suspicions were confirmed. He couldn't help but feel overjoyed. This was a heaven-sent opportunity. Today was a great day for Lin Yi to make a comeback. Moments later, the discussions of the rookies gradually died down. Some of them had already seen through Cha Wu's wishful thinking. While they wrung their hands in envy, they did not have much of a temper. After all, they were not as carefree as Cha Wu, who was first from the bottom. To them, points were not dispensable, but a real lifeblood. Even if they knew that the chances of success were high, they might not risk it. Chapter 3775. With that said, both sides did not move at all, nor did they have the tension of fighting to the death. They just stood on the stage and looked at each other. Seeing Lin Yi's indifferent performance, Cha Wu felt relieved. As he expected, Lin Yi had no intention of making a move. It was obvious that he was just like his underling, Xiao Ran, who was ready to admit defeat. Although there was a 90% chance that Lin Yi would take the initiative to admit defeat, Cha Wu still had some doubts in his heart. What if Lin Yi was stupid and decided to beat him to death? With the disparity in strength, if they really fought, it would really be fatal. Now, if Lin Yi really wanted to make a move, he would have already done so. He would not stand there indifferently and waste time. From the looks of it, this number 1 rookie who loved to show off was probably having a psychological struggle. He could not bring himself to admit defeat in such a short period of time, right? Cha Wu secretly smiled without batting an eyelid. It's fine. As long as you don't make a move, I have all the time in the world to wait for you to admit defeat. He no longer felt any nervousness in his heart. Instead, he felt some regret. He'd heard that the technology in the common world was very advanced, and that there was something called a photographic chicken or something. It was said that you could record the fight and show it to other people. It'd be great if he had something like that in his hands right now. He'd be able to record the scene of Lin Yi admitting defeat, and it'd be something he could brag about later on. Unfortunately, no matter how advanced the technology in the secular world was, it was impossible to transmit it to Heaven Island. Ignoring the fact that there were very few cultivators who could teleport to Heaven Island. Even if they had the intention, those so-called high-tech gadgets could not withstand teleportation. Not only could they not be teleported, even if they were lucky enough to be teleported, it would only become a pile of scrap metal. It was useless. Time slowly passed. The 2 people on the stage did not show any signs of making a move. This time, not only did the other rookies below the stage become impatient, even the referee could not help but urge both parties, please pay attention to the time. If you do not make a move in 15 minutes, it will be considered as the challenger forfeiting and the challenged wins. Within 15 minutes, if both parties did not make a move, then the challenger had to take the initiative to attack. Otherwise, it would be considered as forfeiting. This was the clear rule of the challenge. After all, who asked you to initiate the challenge? Half an incense stick of time passed by in a flash. Cha Wu finally couldn't hold it in any longer. Seeing that the referee was about to announce the verdict, he hurriedly said, "Sir Referee, please wait a moment. This newcomer Lin definitely has something to say." At the same time, Cha Wu couldn't help but blame Lin Yi for being too slow. After hesitating for half an incense stick's time, no matter how much of a psychological struggle he had, He should have finished it by now. How could he continue wasting time like this? How boring. Acting pretentious newbies were so pretentious. Wasn't it just opening his mouth to admit defeat? Was there a need to wait for so long? For a moment, everyone's gaze, including the referee, landed on Lin Yi. Lin Yi smiled faintly and said, "If you insist on saying that, then I really have something to say." Cha Wu heaved a sigh of relief when he heard this. It's finally done. I thought that this guy couldn't bring himself to lose face and was going to change his mind. How fucking terrifying. Unexpectedly, Lin Yi sized him up with a faint smile and said with a teasing look, "Brother Cha Wu, are you sure you don't want to admit defeat? Are you sure you don't want to admit defeat? If so, I'm going to start." Huh? What? What do you mean? Instantly, Cha Wu suspected that he had heard wrongly. He stared at Lin Yi in disbelief for a long time. Coupled with the unexpected uproar below the stage, he finally reacted. Not only did this rascal Lin Yi not admit defeat, he even wanted me to admit defeat? This was fucking illogical. Was this guy so stupid that he couldn't even figure out the situation? I'm giving you a chance to save yourself. The one who should admit defeat should be you, Lin Yi. How can it be me? If I were to admit defeat, then what the fuck is the point of challenging? Do you think I have too many points and want to give them to you? Not only Cha Wu, all the rookies on stage were baffled. Even Meng Jueguang and company were in a daze. Cha Wu's action of taking advantage of a loophole had made Meng Jueguang extremely angry. Although he had strongly encouraged his rookies to challenge Lin Yi and company, for a weakling like Cha Wu to take the initiative to challenge Lin Yi was not to deal with Lin Yi, but to help Lin Yi. Once Lin Yi admitted defeat and switched to cave abode number 12, not only would he create an opportunity for himself, he would also cause great trouble for Meng Tong. Cha Wu's actions were simply a scam. However, to everyone's surprise, Lin Yi did not respond. He did not take the initiative to admit defeat and take the opportunity to dig a hole. Not only did he not grasp such a great opportunity, he foolishly made Cha Wu admit defeat. This could not even be described as stupid. Lin Yi's intelligence was indeed worrisome. Not only Meng Jueguang and company, even senior brother Bitter, Xiao Ran and company were stunned. The principle of retreating to advance was something Lin Yi knew better than the few of them. It did not make sense for him to be unable to see the situation when it was his turn, right? Little did they know that although retreating in order to advance was the best strategy, it was not always necessary to retreat in order to advance. If Lin Yi was in desperate need of points right now, he might have really gone along with the opportunist Cha Wu, but the problem was that he didn't need points at all even if he stayed at the first cave at the foot of the mountain. If that was the case, what was the point of retreating to advance? Lin Yi looked at Cha Wu, who was at a loss, and said with a faint smile, "What do you think? Do you want to admit defeat directly, or do you want to have a serious fight with me? To be honest, my hands and feet are a little itchy now. It's just the right time to move my muscles and bones." What the fuck? Are you an idiot? Why don't you seize this opportunity and fight with me? What's the use of earning my 4 points? Do you understand the principle of retreating to advance? The reality was too cruel. Cha Wu could not help but roar gloomily. With his weak strength, he really did not dare to fight with a freak like Lin Yi. Otherwise, it would be a light punishment for him to injure his muscles and bones. He might even be killed in one move. It was not worth it to lose his life. However, he was not willing to give up just like that, so he could only use this method to remind Lin Yi. Meng Jueguang and the others in the audience suddenly had a black face. Damn it, this guy did not want to live anymore. He was afraid that he could not help Lin Yi out of the trap. Chapter 3776. You? Cha Wu's eyes suddenly widened. However, just as he said a word, what welcomed him was an incomparably hot punch. Frenzy Fist 20 forms. Boom. Cha Wu did not have any strength to resist. He was directly smashed off the stage by Lin Yi's punch, leaving a human-shaped pit on the ground. He struggled for a long time, but could not get up. He could only sit on the ground and vomit blood. Although Lin Yi's punch did not kill him, for a weak rookie like him, Frenzy Fist 20 forms was already a powerful force that could not be resisted. In addition, he was unprepared and caught off guard. It was already Lin Yi's mercy that he was able to survive. His injuries were definitely not light. He would not be able to recover within a few days. Noisy. Lin Yi glanced at the battered and exhausted Chao Wu and then turned to leave the stage under the respectful gazes of the other rookies. For a moment, everyone present, other than feeling baffled by Lin Yi's motive for attacking, was quite shocked. It made many of the opportunists who had the same thoughts as Chao Wu look at each other with lingering fear. Although Chao Wu was indeed recognized as a weakling, he was still a heaven-stage, great perfection expert. In the end, he was beaten to such a state by an ordinary 20 forms. Other than the ridiculous difference in strength, it could only be said that this fellow, Lin Yi, was indeed a little cruel. If killing people did not cause any negative effects, with this fellow's overbearing strength, it was possible that he could kill Chao Wu in one move on the spot. However, what made the rookies feel shocked and relieved was that Lin Yi was not cruel to the point of being unscrupulous and killing people casually. Although the challenge did not avoid casualties, but killing people when there was a huge difference in strength and it was unnecessary, it would more or less cause a bad reputation. It would then affect the future development of the 3 pavilions. It was not worth it. Blue Cloud Pavilion Rookie Challenge. First round, second match, Lin Yi wins. The referee finally gave the final verdict to this duel. Lin Yi smiled slightly. Although he did not care much about the assessment points, now that he had obtained 4 points, his total points had reached 124. It felt pretty good, especially after sending a self-righteous fool like Chao Wu flying with a punch. This feeling was really refreshing. Junior brother Lin, I'm really surprised by your decision. I really didn't expect you to do this. Senior brother Ku Bai and the others smiled and greeted him. Indeed, I didn't expect that either. Xiao Ran nodded in agreement. Originally, with him as a precedent, it wasn't difficult for Lin Yi to make the choice to retreat in order to advance. However, he didn't expect Lin Yi to completely ignore him. He had dealt with Chao Wu, the opportunist, in one move. This result was really beyond their expectations. However, Xiao Honkai said complacently, I'm not surprised at all. What kind of heroic figure is our boss Lin Yi? A weakling like him actually dares to stroke the tiger's whiskers, thinking that he has the 12th abode at the foot of the mountain. Our boss Lin Yi will definitely pay attention to him. How reckless! This kind of clown should be ruthlessly taught a lesson and let him know why flowers are so red. Lin Yi and the others couldn't help but look at each other and smile. This guy's character was really as unyielding as ever. As they spoke, Xiao Honkai suddenly paused and looked at the ground that was smashed by Lin Yi. Chao Wu, who was still in pain and hadn't gotten up until now, suddenly rolled his eyes. Then, without waiting for Lin Yi and the others to speak, taking advantage of the fact that the other newcomers hadn't made a move yet, Xiao Honkai suddenly walked up the ring and said loudly, The 13th abode at the foot of the mountain, Xiao Honkai, challenges the 12th abode at the foot of the mountain, Chao Wu. When these words came out, the audience was in an uproar again, and Chao Wu, who had just suffered a huge loss, was completely dumbfounded when he heard these words. By the time he reacted, Chao Wu only felt his vision blacking out, and he almost kowtowed to death on the ground. Fuck, don't you fucking have any face? Didn't you see that your boss just beat me in such a miserable state? At this time, you actually still want to jump out and hit me when I'm down. Do you still have any fucking humanity? However, no matter how miserable and helpless he was, the challenge had such rules. As long as you had never been challenged before, then you could not reject the first time someone challenged you. Hence, even if he wanted to cry but had no tears, faced with Xiao Hongsai's direct challenge, Chao Wu could only bite the bullet and go up the ring. He couldn't even escape. The other rookies were looking at him with a gloating look as well as some pity. Although everyone harbored ill intentions, who asked a fool like Chao Wu to be the first to jump out and put on a show? Now, not only did he fail to put on a show, he was seriously injured, and now he had to face Xiao Hongsai's inhumane backstabbing. He really reaped what he sowed. After waiting for Cha Wu to slowly drag his injured feet onto the ring, the mysterious pavilion referee immediately announced, Blue Cloud Pavilion Rookie Challenges First Round, Third Match. Abode 13, Xiao Honkai challenges Abode 12 Cha Wu. Begin. Xiao Honkai did not immediately make a move. Instead, she looked at Cha Wu and sneered. Weakling, since you dare to jump out and challenge our boss Lin Yi, then you should know the principle of retreating in order to advance, right? Of course, if you don't know, then I can only reluctantly help you. As he was seriously injured, Cha Wu's face was already pale. After hearing Xiao Hongsai's words, his face turned red. This was not because his injuries had recovered, but because he was fucking angry. What was immediate retribution? This was immediate retribution. Furthermore, it was retribution while you were down, to the point of death. Ignoring the fact that his strength was inferior to Xiao Hongsai's, with Cha Wu's current wretched state, if he were to fight someone, he would probably be lying on the ground before the battle even began. Risking one's life was not the way to play. However, if he were to directly admit defeat, it would hurt his heart. One had to know that he'd only gotten 11 points in the previous 2 rounds, and because he'd challenged Lin Yi before, he'd already lost the 4 points that corresponded to the 14th cave at the foot of the mountain. If he admitted defeat now, he'd have to deduct 4 points from the 11 points. If that was the case, then it would be fine. After all, he was already in last place, so the final number of points wouldn't matter anymore. However, the problem was that there were still fierce people like Meng Tong and Xiao Ran behind him. He might even have to deduct more points in the next few rounds. 3 points for one and 2 points for the other was definitely not a small amount. If that was the case, then his pitiful points would be completely deducted. If the trial of spiritual herbs were to deduct a few more points, then his points might directly become negative. If that was the case, then it would be a huge joke. Chapter 3777. If he had not taken the initiative to challenge Lin Yi, Cha Wu would still have 15 points. Even if he was trampled by people like Meng Tong and Xiao Ran, it would not be a problem. At least, he could maintain a positive score. Now, it was impossible for him to obtain a positive score, but there was hope for him to obtain a negative score. At this moment, Cha Wu wished he could slap himself. Fuck, why did he challenge Lin Yi for no reason? He had really dug a hole for himself. Unfortunately, at this point, not to mention slapping himself in the face, even a 360-degree beating would be useless. There were only 2 choices left for Cha Wu. He could either take the initiative to admit defeat or be beaten to death by others. He was clearly injured to such a state. If he insisted on fighting, he could not blame Xiao Honkai if he was beaten to death. A cripple who would die from a single touch was trying to blackmail him, so he had no other choice. He could not show his virtue and take the initiative to give way. All he could do was beat him up, seeing Xiao Hongsai's imposing manner. As though he was prepared to beat him to death, Cha Wu immediately felt guilty. He hurriedly said, I admit defeat. I admit defeat. Compared to directly losing his life, it was more worth it to admit defeat and lose some points. Even if it was possible for his points to be deducted to negative, he would at least have a chance to struggle. It was better than dying here. Xiao Honkai immediately laughed out loud and gave him a thumbs up. She said sarcastically, You sure know how to advance by retreating. Impressive. Cha Wu was so angry that his face turned as red as a pig's liver. However, the situation was against him, so he could not let out a fart. He could only limp off the stage dejectedly. What welcomed him was the unbridled laughter of the other rookies. Immediately, he felt disheartened. After today's incident, not only had he offended Lin Yi and company, he had also offended Meng Jueguang. Because he had taken advantage of this loophole, he was clearly messing up Meng Jueguang's plans. Meng Jueguang's other rookies naturally did not need to have any scruples. It wouldn't be a problem to step on him when the opportunity presented itself. Cha Wu was already at the bottom of the rankings in terms of strength and ranking, and now he wasn't doing well on either side. He could already predict what would happen to him next. Putting aside whether or not he could enter the Blue Cloud Pavilion in the future, What he needed to consider now was whether or not he could survive the upcoming challenge. Cha Wu's intestines were already green with regret. Fuck, this kind of thing like speculation really killed people. Unfortunately, there was no medicine for regret in this world. Not to mention how much Cha Wu regretted his actions. After Xiao Honkai left the arena, she was in a good mood. Not bad. I didn't expect that you, Honkai, who looks like a hot-blooded young man, would be so good at embroidery. You're so coarse, yet so meticulous. Lin Yi smiled and nodded at him, praising him. Senior brother bitter guy and Xiao Ran heard Lin Yi's words. Only then did they realize the trick and gave him a thumbs up. To be honest, the two of them didn't expect that there would be such a move, but it was seen through by Xiao Honkai, the hot-blooded young man. You really can't judge a book by its cover, and you can't measure the sea with a pail. Xiao Honkai chuckled and said, even a weakling like him understands the principle of retreating in order to advance. How could I not understand it? Boss Lenny, don't look down on me. With his identity as the owner of the 13th cave mansion, coming out to challenge Cha Wu of the 12th cave mansion at the foot of the mountain, this was not purely adding insult to injury, but a real stroke of genius. First of all, Cha Wu had already been seriously injured by Lin Yi. If he, Xiao Honkai, followed up with the last blow, he wouldn't need to consume any true chi, and he would also be able to get 4 points, pinching this jumping clown to vent his anger. And more importantly, he replaced Cha Wu to become the owner of the 12th cave mansion at the foot of the mountain. This was the real highlight that made people slap the table and exclaim in admiration. Don't forget, Meng Tong had just clamored in front of everyone, naming to challenge him, Xiao Honkai, in the next round. Originally, Xiao Honkai was in the 13th cave mansion at the foot of the mountain, just blocking in front of Meng Tong, so it was reasonable for Meng Tong to clamor like this. But now with this, there was Cha Wu in between him and Xiao Honkai. This matter was a bit awkward for Meng Tong. If he challenged Xiao Honkai, then he would have to skip Cha Wu in the middle, which was equivalent to naturally giving up the 3 points on Cha Wu. Don't think that 3 points was a lot, but this was a crucial time for him to catch up and surpass Lin Yi. At that time, he might lose these 3 points, then he would really want to cry, but no tears would come out. However, if he didn't give up on these 3 points, he would have to break his promise. He would have to wait for another round before he could challenge Xiao Honkai. However, he had already made his promise in front of everyone. If he couldn't fulfill it by then, wouldn't he become a laughingstock? If the opponent was an overbearing, strong person like Lin Yi, then it would be fine, but the crucial point was that the opponent was only lumberwaist, a mere underling under Lin Yi. How could he, Meng Tong, admit defeat? Then where would he put his face in the future? How could he still be the leader of the newcomers in Blue Cloud Pavilion? Seeing how Lin Yi, Xiao Honkai, and the others were chatting happily, even someone as dumb as Meng Tong quickly realized the danger. He immediately gritted his teeth and said, damn it, why didn't I know that Lumber Waist was so cunning? He even used such a dirty trick. He's really despicable. Ninth cousin brother, you have to help me think of an idea. Meng Jueguang heard this, turned around, and nodded and bowed to Su Lingchong, asking for his opinion. Young Master Su, what do you think? It's such a small matter. You guys do as you see fit. Su Lingchong didn't care about this at all. He only cared about how to deal with Lin Yi. As for other matters, they didn't even enter young Master Su's eyes. Okay, Meng Jueguang nodded. He was also aware of this, but regardless of whether it was a big or small matter, he had to report diligently. This was the only rule to serve his master. Even if he knew that his master wouldn't care about some small matters, at least he could express his attitude and subtly influence his master. This was a truly brilliant flattering technique. Meng Jueguang then turned his head to look at Meng Tong and sneered cunningly, saying, although the opponent's move is indeed cunning, it's not a big deal. You don't have to care about him. Just follow the original plan and crush each cave abode by cave abode. But, won't I lose face this way? Meng Tong's face was flushed red. He had always wanted to be the leader of the newcomers in Blue Cloud Pavilion. He had just challenged Lumber Waist in public, but in the blink of an eye, he went to challenge a weakling. In the eyes of the other newcomers, how is this different from admitting defeat? He couldn't afford to lose face like this. Chapter 3778. That's right. Isn't this the legendary suppressing one's desires before they rise? Only then did Meng Tong come to a sudden realization. His worries immediately turned into joy as he said, "Ninth cousin brother, you're really resourceful and resourceful. Directly stepping on a jumping clown like Trash Chow is too easy on him. Let him be arrogant. Let him think he's so great, then step on him. The higher he climbs, the more painful it will be to teach him a lesson." That's the logic. Remember, Meng Tong, the most important thing right now is to accumulate points. That's the most practical thing. Try to find a chance to overtake Lin Yi. Force him to be anxious and force him to make mistakes. That's the key. Everything else is secondary. Meng Jueguang earnestly taught, it's fine to step on trash like lumber waste. There's no need to take him seriously. As an expert in the early stage of the foundation establishment realm, you need to have the courage and vision of an expert in the early stage of the foundation establishment realm. Understand? Yes, Ninth cousin is really thoughtful. I'm an expert in the early stage of the foundation establishment realm. Taking a small character like Xiao Honkai seriously is too much. We should leave him hanging like this, let him think that he is something, and then ruthlessly trample him to death. Meng Tong chuckled. Meng Jueguang laughed, then lowered his voice and warned that Xiao Ran is more sensible and took the initiative to admit defeat. That's why I didn't have a chance to make a move. There's nothing we can do about it. But this trash Xiao is different. With his reckless personality, when the time comes, even if he knows he's no match for you, he'll still fight you. You must grasp this opportunity. Find a chance for me to kill him in one move. Don't leave him alive. Do you understand me? Understood. Ninth cousin, don't worry. As long as I meet him, this brat will be waiting to die. Meng Tong patted his chest and promised. Testing the depth of Lin Yi's strength and cutting off the two wings of Xiao Ran and Xiao Honkai was Meng Jueguang's goal in this round. The first target was still too early. After all, the only newcomers under him who had the strength to test Lin Yi was Meng Tong, an early-stage foundation establishment practitioner. Even a newcomer with strength, like Li Zhengming, wouldn't be able to do much. The others, such as Li Zhengming, weren't qualified. But the second goal was the most important. To get rid of Lin Yi, he had to first get rid of his wings. This was the strategy that Meng Jueguang and Su Lingqiong came up with after discussion. After all, they had failed to kill Lin Yi several times before. If they continued to do so, the possibility of success would not be high. They might as well try to get rid of his two underlings, Xiao Ran and Xiao Honkai. These two wouldn't be as difficult to deal with as Lin Yi. This way, not only could they weaken his strength, but they could also dampen his spirit and force him to do something desperate. It was killing two birds with one stone. But unfortunately, although this plan hit the nail on the head, due to the restrictions of the challenge, no matter how many newcomers Meng Jueguang had, there was no way he could use the human wave tactic. Moreover, because the ranking of Xiao Ran and Xiao Honkai was very low, there was only one person who was qualified to challenge them, and that was Meng Tong. Of course, with Meng Tong's strength in the early stage of foundation building, to deal with the two underlings of Lin Yi, he alone was enough. However, to their surprise, Xiao Ran, who was usually quiet, was actually so slippery. He did not give Meng Tong any chance to make a move and directly chose to admit defeat. But then, with Xiao Hongsai's personality, it was impossible for him to admit defeat like Xiao Ran. So what if he was temporarily complacent, as long as he was up against Meng Tong? With his mere heaven stage great perfection strength, he would definitely die. That was good too. This was also good. Since Xiao Ran had escaped, then he would use this trash Xiao as an example to draw blood. In the first round of the Blue Cloud Pavilion Newcomer Challenge, the first 3 battles could be said to be full of twists and turns and treacherous. Counting carefully, none of the battles were serious battles of strength, but each battle had a profound meaning. One careless mistake could lead to death, and the danger was self-evident. But after that, whether it was Lin Yi's group or Meng Tong, these few most dazzling newcomers of Blue Cloud Pavilion had finished their challenges. Because of the ranking of the cave abode, no one else could challenge them, so there was nothing for them to do. As for the remaining newcomers, whether it was strength or topic, they were far less eye-catching than these few people. Although they fought a few battles here and there, with some wins and losses, overall there was nothing special to speak of. It was plain and uninteresting. Among these people, Li Zhengming's strength was relatively outstanding, and he could suppress the other newcomers. Unfortunately, the situation he was facing now was as awkward as Lin Yi. He was trapped in the second cave abode at the foot of the mountain, unable to extricate himself. He had strength, but there was no place for him to use it. This was something that could not be helped. He could only hold it in and wait for the other newcomers to take the initiative to challenge him. To challenge Lin Yi, firstly, he was Lin Yi's secret lackey, so it was unlikely. Secondly, it was purely sending himself to his death, and he was not that crazy. In the end, there were a total of 7 battles in the first round. Other than the battle between Meng Tong and Lin Yi's organization, as well as the unlucky Cha Wu, who overestimated his own capabilities, there were some who were happy and some who were worried. There were no more accidents. In a short span of 3 hours, the 7 battles had ended, and the first round of the Blue Cloud Pavilion Newcomer Challenge had come to an end. The newcomers then dispersed. Those who needed to treat their injuries did so. Those who needed to think of countermeasures did so. And those who needed to cultivate their spiritual herb seeds cultivated their spiritual herb seeds. All of them were busy preparing. After all, the spiritual herb trial and the newcomer challenge were stacked together. The intensity was self-evident. Other than a strong person like Lin Yi, no one could be idle. Not bad, not bad. In the first round of the newcomer challenge, the few juniors had gotten off to a good start. Congratulations, the bitter senior brother said to Lin Yi and company with a look of relief. This was not false at all. Counting Lin Yi and company, Lin Yi won 1 battle and obtained 4 points. Xiao Honkai won 1 battle and obtained 4 points. Although Xiao Ran lost 2 points, he took the initiative to give up and did not give Meng Tong the opportunity to injure him. So, to a certain extent, this was also a victory. More importantly, not to mention the number 1 newcomer, Lin Yi, who no one dared to provoke, Xiao Ran and Xiao Honkai did not consume any qi. This meant that in the following period of time, they did not need to waste time on recovering their qi. They could directly break through to the foundation establishment stage, according to plan. Once they succeeded, the situation would be very different when they faced Meng Tong. Chapter 3779. As for Xiao Honkai, although his strength was far inferior to Xiao Ran's, his personality determined that he was more aggressive. In a critical moment, this personality might play a miraculous role. Moreover, although his current position was not as unique as Xiao Ran's, he was separated from Meng Tong by Cha Wu. If nothing unexpected happened, Meng Tong would probably trample on Cha Wu first in order to gain as many points as possible to surpass Lin Yi. Then, he would have plenty of time to break through to the foundation establishment stage. Xiao Ran, Honkai, I'll be waiting for your good news. Lin Yi smiled and encouraged them, then added, there's no need to carry any baggage. Just throw it all away. If you fail, at most you will just waste a foundation establishment pill. What's the big deal? As long as you need it, I'll get it for you in minutes. Don't forget, I'm an alchemist. Xiao Honkai heard this and laughed. With Boss Lin Yi's words, I'll go back and fight for it. If I really fail, boss, you have to take responsibility for me. Damn, take responsibility my ass. I'm not into men. Stay away from me. Lin Yi hurriedly jumped 2 feet away in an exaggerated manner and looked at Xiao Honkai warily. Senior brother Bitter and Xiao Ran looked at each other and laughed. Only Xiao Honkai had a look of hidden bitterness. Boss, you can't do this. Why can't you keep your promise? You're a heartless man who abandons his lover. Get lost. Lin Yi didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Compared to Lin Yi's group's joyous mood, The other clear cloud pavilion's new disciple's face was gloomy and gloomy, to the point where he even had thoughts of suicide. This person was naturally Cha Wu. Cha Wu was already at the bottom of the leaderboard. In the end, not only did he lose all his points, but he was also seriously injured because of this. Cha Wu's current situation could only be described as miserable. Previously on the arena, although Lin Yi did not kill him, no matter what, he was still an expert at the peak of the early stage of Foundation establishment. Even if it was only the 20th form of the Frenzy Fist, it was definitely not something that an ordinary expert at the peak of Heaven stage could withstand. The fact that Cha Wu was still alive was already because Lin Yi had shown mercy, and he had to rejoice. Although it wasn't fatal, with his current ability, he wouldn't be able to recover without at least 7 or 8 days. And after 7 or 8 days, apart from healing, there was nothing else he could do. Not only would he not be able to fight in the next round of the challenge, he would even be forced to give up on the spiritual herb seeds that he was currently cultivating. After all, his original body was already in such a miserable state. How would he have the strength and chi left to serve these pampered masters? However, it was fortunate that he had been cautious and didn't use all 10 of the spirit herb seeds at once. Instead, he only chose 3 to experiment with. Even if he had to give up, he would only give up 3, not all of them. Otherwise, if all 10 spiritual herb seeds withered and died, this segment of the spiritual herb trial would deduct 10 points, and Cha Wu would have to kneel down. And he would never be able to make a comeback. One had to know that after losing 4 points each to Lin Yi and Xiao Hongkai, Cha Wu was left with a total of 7 points. This didn't even include the dangerous situation that he would have to face Meng Tong, Xiao Ran, and the others. If 10 points were deducted from the spiritual herb trial, he would directly become negative 3 points. After that, he would be messed with by Meng Tong and Xiao Ran. This negative number would only get bigger and bigger. Want to make up for it would be wishful thinking. With Cha Wu's current strength, it was impossible. Otherwise, he wouldn't have fallen to this state today. If he ended the newcomer exam with negative points, then he, Cha Wu, would be crippled for the rest of his life. With the current situation of the Heavenly Islands cultivation world, most of the cultivation resources were in the hands of the major sections. There was no future for a grassroots cultivator, unless he encountered some heaven-defying opportunity. For a cultivator with average talent like Cha Wu, not being able to enter the 3 great pavilions meant that he would at most be able to reach the Foundation establishment stage. It couldn't be any better than this. Without the opportunity, he wouldn't even be able to reach the early stage of Foundation establishment. He would die as a Heaven stage full circle. If it was in the secular world, a Heaven stage full circle was already an incredible expert that could dominate the world. But the problem was that this was the Heavenly Island. A Heaven stage full circle was like a dog. The early stage of Foundation establishment was just the beginning. A Heaven stage full circle wouldn't even be able to greet people. Even if he died, he would only have this little bit of strength. He would be trampled on by whoever he saw. However, if he came out with negative points, then Cha Wu could forget about entering the Blue Cloud Pavilion for the rest of his life. If he couldn't enter the Blue Cloud Pavilion, it would be even more impossible for him to enter the other sections. He could only live like this for the rest of his life. I'll die as a Heaven stage full circle. How can such a pitiful, laughable, and shameful thing happen to me? Cha Wu. Cha Wu clenched his fists so hard that his veins popped. He gritted his teeth and muttered to himself. Then, ignoring the serious injuries on his body, he struggled to get up and walk towards the entrance of the cave. Everything that happened before could no longer be changed. He was very clear that if this continued, he would end up with a negative point and not being able to enter the Blue Cloud Pavilion. This was almost an inevitable ending. Therefore, in order to save his own fate, he had to do something. At the very least, he had to make some changes to seek a chance of survival. In terms of the spiritual medicine trial, because of the interruption in the supply of true chi, 3 spiritual medicine seeds were destined to wither. As for the remaining 7, even if he didn't consider the burden of the challenge, with the density of spiritual chi in his cave and the supply of true chi, The success rate of cultivating them was basically close to zero. It could be ignored. In the end, if he could successfully cultivate one or two, it would already be a blessing from his ancestors. However, there was no good way for the spiritual medicine seeds, but it didn't mean that there was no turning around in other areas. Admittedly, with Cha Wu's strength that was close to the bottom, it was not very realistic to fight for as many points as he wanted to in the cruel challenge. He still had this bit of self-awareness. However, he couldn't take the initiative to plunder points from other newcomers, but at least he could think of a way to lose less points. As long as his points weren't too much and he didn't end up with negative points in this segment, it would be considered a victory. Therefore, what he had to do now was to beg for mercy from someone. Seeing that there was no one around, Cha Wu tiptoed to the entrance of cave number 14 at the foot of the mountain next door and touched the restriction. The owner of this cave was originally Lin Yi, then Xiao Ran, but now it had been changed to Meng Tong. Chapter 3780. Cha Wu was seriously injured, but he still forced himself to cheer up. With a face full of flattery, he said, "Boss Meng Tong, you flatter me too much. How could I be so daring? I'm just following Senior Brother Meng's and Boss's call to give Lin Yi trouble. So that's how it is." Meng Tong shook his shoulders. "That's right," Cha Wu hurriedly added. "Even if our strength is not good, we can't let Lin Yi be so comfortable. We can't say that we will win, but at least we have to consume some of his true qi. When we get back, we can let his 40 elixir seeds wither. That could be considered as doing a little bit for Senior Brother Meng and Boss Meng Tong, right? It's rare for a weakling like you to have such loyalty. I thought you took the initiative to give points to Lin Yi, that pretentious guy, and defected to the enemy." Meng Tong sneered. Even if he, Meng Tong, was not smart, how could he not see through Cha Wu jumping out to challenge Lin Yi with such an obvious intention? Even if he could not see it himself, there was still the wily Meng Jueguang standing beside him. Although Lin Yi did not think clearly at that time and did not jump out of the first pit, but chose to fight with Cha Wu, in the end, he defeated him with one move. Not to mention that he gave him 4 points for nothing. In the end, he did not consume any true qi at all. Do a little bit of it? That's bullshit. Defected to the enemy? Cha Wu's face suddenly changed. He hurriedly smiled and waved his hand, saying, "Boss Meng Tong, you must be joking. With my little bit of courage and strength, I can't wait to hug Senior Brother Meng and Boss's thighs. How could I defect to the enemy? Not to mention Lin Yi's unlucky, pretentious look. How could he be as wise and powerful as Senior Brother Meng and Boss? Isn't relying on him looking for trouble? I, your little brother, am not blind. How could I be so unwise?" What you said is quite reasonable. With that pretentious fellow's bad luck, how could he contend with the combination of me and ninth cousin brother? Anyone with a discerning eye would know how to choose. It seems like I really misunderstood you before. Meng Tong was instantly refreshed by this round of flattery. In a good mood, he laughed heartily and patted Cha Wu's shoulder. Cha Wu secretly breathed a sigh of relief. Fortunately, Meng Tong was simple-minded and easy to fool. Otherwise, it would have been really hard to pass today. Striking while the iron was hot, Cha Wu followed up with another round of flattery, making Meng Tong feel comfortable all over. The time was right. Only then did he gather his courage and carefully approach the purpose of this trip. "Boss Meng Tong, speaking of which, you're going to crush that idiot lumber waste in the next round of the challenge, right?" Cha Wu sounded nonchalant, but in fact his heart was hanging by a thread. Next round? Meng Tong was stunned. Following that, he sized up Cha Wu playfully and said, "Then you are wrong. Aren't you at the 13th cave abode at the foot of the mountain? In the next round, I'm obviously going to use you to pave the way." Cha Wu's heart immediately sank. Although he had expected this before coming, when he really heard it from Meng Tong's mouth, he could not help but feel a chill in his heart. But, Boss Meng Tong, didn't you do it in front of all of us previously? In front of everyone, you're going to challenge lumber waste in the next round? If you change your mind midway, it's not very good. Cha Wu hurriedly persuaded. "Why do you say that? Meng Tong frowned. Boss Meng Tong, think about it. Going back on one word isn't a big deal to us normal rookies. But you are our rookie boss. What stands out is your prestige. But where does your prestige come from? Other than being strong, the most important thing is to keep your word. If a boss goes back on his word, how can he have any prestige? Don't you think so? Cha Wu patiently persuaded. What you said does make sense. Meng Tong pinched his chin and said thoughtfully. In fact, he himself also had such concerns. If not, he wouldn't have hesitated before. After all, he had wholeheartedly regarded himself as the boss of the newcomers. As a boss, he had clearly promised to trample Trash Qiao to death in the next round. How could he go back on his words? However, after being lectured by Meng Jiawang, he threw this thought to the back of his head. Just like what Meng Jiawang said, as a foundation establishment realm expert, he had to have the style of an early-stage foundation establishment realm expert. If he took Lumber Waste, who was only a heaven-stage great perfection realm rookie, too seriously and missed out on the actual benefits of points, then he would be overestimating his opponent. Moreover, the losses would outweigh the gains. One was actual points, the other was an insignificant reputation. Moreover, he would be able to get back at Lumber Waste very quickly. It was clear which was more important. However, although that was the case for a rookie boss like Meng Tong, who was extremely prideful, reputation was also very important. If he were to lose his prestige for 3 points, it would not be worth it. Seeing that Meng Tong was tempted, Cha Wu was overjoyed. He continued to persuade him. That's right. With Boss Meng Tong's strength, it would be easy for you to get 100 points in this kind of challenge. When that time comes, you would be able to surpass Lin Yi, that pretentious brat. Why would you be sure of these 3 points? For these 3 insignificant points, you would lose your prestige in everyone's hearts. Forgive me for being blunt, but this is a little neglecting the essentials. Is that so? Then does that mean I have to let you go? Meng Tong squinted at him. Isn't that so, Boss Meng Tong? If you let this little brother go and directly trample on that idiot Trash Qiao, it would be killing 2 birds with 1 stone. Cha Wu beamed with joy as he boasted. Killing 2 birds with 1 stone? Kid, why don't you tell me how to kill 2 birds with 1 stone? Meng Tong was instantly interested. Think about it, Boss Meng Tong. If you let me off this time, firstly, you won't have to go back on your words, and you'll be able to maintain your prestige in everyone's hearts. Secondly, you'll be able to give up the points in your hands to protect me. Wouldn't that be the legendary, supremely righteous? Who would dare to be disrespectful to such a loyal boss? Don't you think so? Cha Wu analyzed with a serious expression. Kid, your words are very reasonable. Meng Tong nodded. Even in his dreams, he dreamed of gaining the support of the other new disciples. His words carried enormous weight, and no one dared to have the slightest objection. Only then could he be considered the real Clear Cloud Pavilion's big boss. Otherwise, he would only be deceiving himself. Chapter 3781. That's right. I've long since found trash like Trash Qiao to be an eyesore. This time, I've finally found an opportunity with great difficulty, so I must properly deal with him. Meng Tong's eyes lit up as he listened. Then, Boss Meng Tong, you're saying that you're going to let this little brother off this time and directly trample that idiot Trash Qiao to death in the next round? Cha Wu couldn't help but ask with a face full of hope. Meng Tong was stunned when he heard that. Then, he had a strange look on his face. He sneered at him and said, When did I say that? Did I say I'm going to let you go? Weakling, don't lie to yourself. Huh? Cha Wu was stunned. After a while, he quickly smiled and said, Boss Meng Tong, my heart isn't good. I can't take fright. Please don't joke with me. Who's joking with you? Do you think I'm so free to joke with a weakling like you and waste my time? Meng Tong sneered incessantly. He didn't have the slightest trace of the complacent expression he had a moment ago after being flattered. After hearing that, Cha Wu was so angry that his mouth became crooked. He had a stomach full of vulgarities, but he didn't dare to curse out loud. Fuck, I've wasted so much saliva to persuade you. If you don't agree, then why the fuck did you nod at me? Do you have to be so shameless? How the fuck do you want to be the new boss with this kind of attitude? Meng Tong was a simple-minded guy. In Chao Wu's eyes, he should be easy to fool. He had said it well before. He didn't expect him to suddenly go back on his words. This was really unexpected. Little did he know that Meng Tong was easy to fool. However, he had been warned by Meng Zhuguang before that practical benefits were more important than anything else. Even if he really believed Chao Wu and wanted to let him go, Meng Tong didn't have the guts to go against Meng Zhuguang's orders. Well, I had to know. Meng Zhuguang was not only his ninth cousin, but also his only support. As long as Meng Zhuguang said something, what could Chao Wu, a weakling who wasn't liked by others, say? Anything? Should he listen to Meng Zhuguang or listen to the weak Chao Wu? This question was not a multiple-choice question for Meng Tong. After hearing Meng Tong sneer, Chao Wu couldn't help but shiver as if he had fallen into an ice house. Before this, he didn't think that Meng Tong would be such a cold-blooded and overbearing person. He had coaxed and pestered Meng Tong for so long, but he still couldn't move this guy. His painstaking efforts were all in vain. Weakling, listen carefully. Prepare to surrender in the next round. Of course, if you're unwilling, I don't mind showing off my skills. I don't mind showing off my strength, but I won't care whether you live or die when the time comes. Do you understand what I mean? Meng Tong's smile became more and more ferocious as he spoke. Originally, he planned to use Xiao Ran in the first round. He didn't expect Xiao Ran to be so slippery. Once he saw that the situation wasn't good, he took the initiative to admit defeat. So, Meng Tong had a stomach full of energy. If Chao Wu didn't have eyes and took the initiative to go up, the result could be imagined. Yes, I understand. I'll take my leave. Chao Wu was cursing in his heart. He was greeting Meng Tong's family of 18 generations of females, but he still had to maintain a forced smile on his face. However, this smile looked bitter no matter how you looked at it. It was almost the same as a bitter senior. At this point, it was meaningless to say anything more. No matter how miserable Chao Wu was, he could only pinch his nose and retreat. In this way, Meng Tong had already named to take 3 points from him, and then Xiao Ran, who was in the 15th cave at the foot of the mountain, would immediately take 2 points from him. For Chao Wu, who only had the starting points left, and was destined to lose a lot of points in the spirit medicine trial round, it was almost inevitable that he would accumulate negative points in the first 4 assessment rounds. His future was miserable and bleak. 3 days later, the second round of the newcomer challenge began as scheduled. Because of the 7 matches in the first round, the situation of all the Blue Cloud Pavilion newcomers had gradually become clear. Everyone knew what they should and shouldn't do. So, they didn't fall into a stalemate like last time. They didn't confront each other and directly started fighting. At the foot of the mountain, in the 15th abode of a mortal's cave, Xiao Ran was currently busy concentrating on building his foundation. With his calm and reserved personality, he would definitely not take the initiative to challenge others before he successfully built his foundation. He was not the kind of idiot who would destroy his own Great Wall. Indeed, Meng Tong was the first to go up the stage in Abode 14 at the foot of the mountain. Furthermore, he challenged Chao Wu in Abode 13 by name. Although this action was reasonable, it was somewhat unexpected to the other rookies. After all, Meng Tong did not seem like a calm and rational person. For the sake of a trifling 3 points, Meng Tong had directly thrown his vow to declare war against Xiao Honkai to the back of his mind. This kind of act of going back on one's word and disregarding his face like floating clouds was really not something a simple-minded guy like Meng Tong could do. However, no matter what the others thought, Meng Tong did it. Furthermore, it seemed like he didn't care about the discussions of the crowd. Facing such a powerful and overbearing early-stage foundation establishment expert, a weakling like Chao Wu had no way of resisting. Ignoring the fact that his strength wasn't enough, in fact, even if he had the strength to fight, with his current state of being heavily injured, it was impossible for him to take the initiative. He could only take the initiative to give up. Chao Wu directly admitted defeat, and Meng Tong easily obtained 3 points. Furthermore, he was promoted to the number 13 Immortal's Cave at the foot of the mountain. This result was logical, and no one was surprised at all. Although Meng Tong had gone back on his word, it was a common occurrence in the cultivation world that was full of deceit. Therefore, it did not cause much discussion. However, in comparison, Chao Wu, who was the weaker party and was in a miserable situation, had become the target of ridicule from the rookies. Serve him right. This brat thought he could take advantage of the opportunity. He really overestimated himself. He clearly knows that his strength is weak to this extent, yet he still dared to do this. He took the initiative to challenge Lin Yi. Heh, only this weakling could think of this. That's right. He doesn't even know what he's made of. He has quite the guts, but unfortunately, he has the guts in the wrong place. That's right. Who doesn't know how to speculate? But even if it's speculating, it still depends on whether or not he has the strength to do it. This weakling overestimates himself. If he doesn't have a few tricks up his sleeve, he won't be able to go to Liangshan. Everyone is cheap. With his measly strength, he actually dared to take advantage of senior brother Meng and senior brother Lin Yi's loopholes. This kind of idiot who doesn't know the difference between life and death. In my opinion, this bastard won't be able to escape the fate of losing points. He can forget about entering Clear Cloud Pavilion ever again. Chapter 3782. Zhao Wu's heart sank to the bottom as he listened to these people's sarcasm and ridicule. Although it was normal in the cultivation world to trample on others when they were down, the current situation wasn't just being trampled on by others. It was simply enraging everyone. If Chao Wu was strong and had the confidence to go against Meng Jiuwang like Lin Yi, it would have been fine. However, not only was he not strong, he was at the bottom and was in a difficult situation. If he incurred the wrath of the masses, it would be equivalent to cutting himself off from the 3 pavilions. Fuck, he was too smart for his own good. He had really dug his own grave this time. Chao Wu wished he could give himself 2 tight slaps. If he had kept his points to himself and did not have the wild idea of challenging Lin Yi to gain attention, he would not have reaped what he sowed and ended up in such a miserable state. Now, it would be considered a light punishment if he wanted to cry but had no tears. Once he was locked in with negative points and had no chance of entering Blue Cloud Pavilion, all his previous efforts would have been for naught. It would be the end of his life. There was only one ending for him, and that was to be thrown into the mining area. Not to mention Chao Wu's side, the other Clear Cloud Pavilion's newcomers were fighting hard in this round's challenge round. In order to gain more points, each and every one of them fought with all their might, and the scene could be said to be very exciting. However, this excitement had nothing to do with Lin Yi and the others. Xiaoran was needless to say. He was deep in cave abode number 15 at the foot of the mountain, preparing to build his foundation. As for Lin Yi, he was trapped in cave abode number 1 at the foot of the mountain and could not take the initiative to challenge others. With Chao Wu as a living example, even if the other rookies had the same hope, they did not dare to challenge him at this time. What a joke. Lin Yi, this pretentious guy, did not know what was good for him. His strength was so strong that it was hard to understand. If he took the initiative to challenge him, not only would he not be able to stand out, he would also be beaten up like the next Chao Wu. He might even lose his life. Who would dare to do such a thing again? Among the 3 of Lin Yi's group, the one who had the highest chance of stirring up a storm was Qiao Honkai, who was at the 12th cave residence at the foot of the mountain. Firstly, his cave abode ranking was not bad. He had the right to challenge more than a dozen rookies above him. He had a unique, innate advantage. Secondly, in the 13th Immortal's cave at the foot of the mountain, there was Meng Tong, who was in the early stage of foundation establishment. Looking at the entire Blue Cloud Pavilion, the only person who had the confidence to say that he was not nervous was probably Lin Yi. Everyone else, including Qiao Honkai, was under immense pressure. At a time like this, any normal person would try to stay away from Meng Tong as much as possible. Therefore, no matter how she looked at it, Qiao Honkai could use the same trick again. Just like how she challenged Chao Wu in the previous round, she could challenge one more person. Not only could she gain points, but she could also temporarily get rid of the threat of Meng Tong and fight for a rare buffer. However, to the surprise of all the rookies present, Xiao Honkai did not make any moves. She did not take the initiative to challenge, nor was she challenged. Instead, she just stood there without any wind or rain. This result, even senior brother Ku Bai was a little surprised. He couldn't help but ask curiously, "Junior brother Qiao, didn't you say that you would retreat in order to advance? Why didn't you challenge higher?" When he first entered the welcoming pavilion, Xiao Honkai was only an expert at the peak of the late stage of Heaven Stage. Compared to other rookies, he did not have any advantage. But after joining Lin Yi, his strength had improved by leaps and bounds. Even if he faced other experts at the same level as him, he had enough advantages. He dared not say that he could kill all of them, but at least the success rate of challenging higher was not low. In this way, he could once again fight for a chance to turn things around for himself. Before facing Meng Tong, he could win time to break through to the foundation establishment stage. In the eyes of senior brother Ku Bai and the others, this strategy was actually very reliable. However, Xiao Honkai shook his head and said, "Senior brother Ku, you don't understand me. People like me will only take a step back once in a while when I have no other choice. It's not my style to take a step back again and again. So, this time, I will definitely not retreat again. The next round will be the decisive battle between me and Meng Tong." The answer was so resolute that senior brother Ku Bai helplessly shook his head and suddenly had nothing to say. After all, Xiao Honkai was a hot-blooded Xiao Honkai. In the last round, he played a clever trick and took a step back. This had already reached his limit. It was really unrealistic to want him to retreat again and again on this basis. His attitude was already very firm. No matter what, whether he could succeed or not, he had to fight with Meng Tong in the next round. This was already an unavoidable conclusion. However, if he succeeded in breaking through to the foundation establishment stage in the next 3 days, then it would be better. But if he failed, not only would he have to face Meng Tong with the strength of the Heaven Stage Great Perfection, he would also suffer a serious backlash because of the failure to break through. For a Heaven Stage Great Circle expert to go into battle with an injured Foundation Establishment expert, and one who had a grudge with the other party, what kind of ending that would be, even if one used their toes to think about it. The bitter senior brother secretly gave Lin Yi a look, indicating for Lin Yi to persuade him. Although he was the senior brother in charge and Lin Yi and the other two were nominally under his protection, everyone knew what was going on in reality. At the end of the day, Lin Yi was the core of their group. Once he spoke, not only would Xiao Ran and Xiao Honkai listen to him, even senior brother Ku Bai would automatically follow his arrangements. This was something that senior brother Ku Qian had already understood a long time ago. Although Xiao Hongsai's character was more stubborn, once he made up his mind, he would not turn back until he hit the wall. Even if he hit the wall, he would not turn back until he hit the wall. However, this also depended on the person. It was useless for senior brother Ku Bai and the others to persuade him, but if it was Lin Yi, it might not necessarily be useless. Lin Yi's position in Xiao Hongsai's heart was absolutely high. One sentence from him was at least worth 100 sentences from others. However, Lin Yi smiled and said, "Then you work hard and strive to break through to the Foundation Establishment stage before you face Meng Tong. I'm waiting to see your performance." "Okay, boss, just wait and see. I'm going into seclusion now." Xiao Honkai waved his fist excitedly, turned around, and went into his cave house number 12 at the foot of the mountain. Chapter 3783. Once Xiao Honkai failed to break through to the Foundation Establishment stage, Meng Jueguang and Meng Tong would definitely not let him go. They would take the opportunity to kill him in the arena easily, forcing senior brother Ku and Lin Yi to be unable to intervene. It's okay. Don't be fooled by Hongsai's reckless appearance. I can guarantee that he must have thought through these things more thoroughly than us. Since he has already made up his mind to break through, we have no reason to hold him back. Just let him do it. Lin Yi patted senior brother Ku's shoulder and comforted him. In his opinion, if Xiao Honkai failed to break through to the Foundation Establishment stage, he would probably admit defeat like Xiao Ran based on his rough performance in the last round. It was unlikely that he would foolishly risk his life to show off. Even if Xiao Honkai really fought with Meng Tong, Lin Yi was confident that he could save him as long as he could hold on to his last breath. Therefore, to a certain extent, Lin Yi had the ability to save the situation, so there was no need to worry too much. At this time, Xiao Ran suddenly said, thoughtfully, "Boss Lin Yi, senior brother Ku, you don't have to worry too much about him. I have a feeling that Honkai is very likely to surpass me." After a few days of full adjustment, Xiao Ran felt that he had almost 80% confidence in breaking through to the foundation establishment stage. He planned to make preparations in the next 2 days. However, no matter how well prepared he was, the process of breaking through to the foundation establishment stage differed from person to person. People like Xiao Honkai, who were full of vigor, might be able to achieve results in a moment. But if it was him, Xiao Ran, the process would inevitably be like boiling porridge over a slow fire. Regardless of success or failure, it would probably be a stalemate for a period of time. This is good. Honkai is just suitable to be the vanguard. It's not bad to let him fight with Meng Tong first. Then, Xiao Ran, you can make a backup move. Both sides have double insurance. That would be complete. Don't be idle here. Hurry up and go into close seclusion and wait for good news. Lin Yi said with a smile. Okay. Xiao Ran nodded and bid farewell to senior brother Ku Bai, then turned around and walked into the number 15 abode of a mortal's cave at the foot of the mountain. After watching Xiao Ran leave, the bitter senior brother turned to look at Lin Yi and said with emotion, "Junior brother Lin, I won't hide it from you. Before today, I always thought that you were the dragon among us, but now I suddenly have a feeling. Our junior brother Xiao and junior brother Qiao are not ordinary people either. If they follow junior brother Lin, they will definitely soar into the sky in the future. On the other hand, as a senior brother, I don't have much talent or ability. This is all I can do for the rest of my life." Senior brother Ku, you're belittling yourself. Lin Yi put an arm around Ku Bai's shoulder. I'll take this opportunity to give you a piece of advice as a disciple. We practitioners need to have confidence. If you don't even believe in yourself, then you'll have to face the consequences. If you don't believe in yourself, how can you expect to break through? By the way, senior brother Ku, how are the effects of the 2 foundation-breaking pills you gave me last time? Senior brother Ku Bai smiled awkwardly and said, I'm afraid that I'll waste your efforts, so I'm still making preparations. I haven't taken them yet. No wonder. Lin Yi held his forehead speechlessly. No wonder he hadn't seen any movement from senior brother Ku Bai until now. He thought that he had failed to break through the barrier. It turned out that he was just as cautious as Xiao Ran. He didn't dare to take it easily. To be honest, with senior brother Ku Bai's strength and foundation over the years, plus the foundation-breaking pills that Lin Yi gave him, he would be able to break through to the peak of the early stage of the foundation-building realm. Once he broke through to the peak of the early stage of the foundation-building realm, there was almost a 100% chance of success. There was no need to worry too much. Senior brother Ku, I have to say something to you. You are our leader, and we're counting on you to shelter us from the wind and rain. Besides, since I can refine foundation-breaking pills, you don't have to be so thrifty, senior brother Ku. Use them first, and I'll refine more if there's not enough. Lin Yi advised. When Lin Yi said that, senior brother Ku Bai couldn't help but blush. He nodded repeatedly and said, Junior brother Lin, you're right. I'm used to being poor, and I'm afraid of wasting good things. That's why I don't dare to touch them. I've forgotten that you're our alchemist. If it's not enough, I won't stand on ceremony. This guy was really afraid of being poor. He was guarding the good things, but didn't dare to use them. Lin Yi shook his head speechlessly, and then said, Of course, no problem. All right, senior brother Ku. Recently, there's a rumor that Su Lingchong is preparing to protect Meng Jueguang to take over the position of third pavilion master. Have you heard about it? There's such a thing? Senior brother Ku Bai was shocked. In fact, Lin Yi knew about this news from Li Zhongming's intelligence. It was still in the brewing stage of top secret. It was normal that senior brother Ku Bai didn't get wind of it. If this matter really becomes a foregone conclusion, it won't be good. Senior Brother Ku Bai said with a face full of lingering fear. Although what Linny said was still groundless, if he thought about it carefully, if Su Lingqiong really wanted to push Meng Jueguang to take over the position, the possibility of success was really not small. According to the usual practice, the position of third pavilion master of Welcoming Pavilion would be given to someone from Blue Cloud Pavilion. If there were no special accidents, Soaring Sky Pavilion and Mysterious Pavilion would not intervene. However, although the position of third pavilion master did not have much power, it was still considered to be in the upper echelons of an independent department. In the end, which disciple of Blue Cloud Pavilion to take over the position had to be submitted to the Elders Guild for review. Generally speaking, for this unimportant position, no matter which disciple was submitted, the Elders Guild would only acquiesce and not reject it. However, if someone objected to this, the Clear Cloud Pavilion would not go against the Elders Council's decision. Therefore, if Su Lingqiong took the route of the upper echelons and let his grandfather Su Yuanjing speak on behalf of Meng Jueguang, Meng Jueguang's position as third pavilion master would basically be stable. No one would be able to compete with him. Once Meng Jueguang took the position of third pavilion master, he would have more power in his hands. He would be able to reach out to everything. At that time, it would be even more difficult to say what would happen to them. However, Senior Brother Ku, you don't need to be anxious. I heard that in order to compete for the position of third pavilion master, you need to have the strength of at least the middle stage of the foundation building realm. Therefore, we still have a chance to muddy the waters and fight for an opportunity. However, before that, Senior Brother Ku, you must improve your strength. Lin Yi analyzed. Without strength, one would not have the right to speak. It would be useless to talk and fight for more opportunities. Although Lin Yi's strength was enough, if he wanted to compete for the position of third pavilion master, it was obviously not enough for him as a new disciple. Only Senior Brother Ku would have the chance to take over. Of course, the prerequisite was that he had enough strength. Chapter 3784. Looking at the back of his bitter senior brother, Lin Yi nodded to himself. If everything went well, the strength of the three people by his side should be able to increase by another level. If these people became stronger, it meant that his own power would become stronger. At that time, his words would naturally have more weight. If Meng Jueguang and the others wanted to do anything, they would have to think twice before doing anything. This way, at least, he could avoid a lot of unnecessary trouble. Of course, for Lin Yi, the most important thing was his own strength. However, because he had just reached the peak of the early stage of the foundation establishment realm, it was not realistic to break through in a short period of time. He had to consolidate his strength for a period of time first. Other than that, Lin Yi's top priority was to take care of the two heart-devouring exquisite grass seeds. As long as these two seeds grew, he would not have to worry about getting the foundation establishment pill. Otherwise, he would have to start having a headache searching for the heart-devouring exquisite grass. It had been a whole 8 days since the day he received the spiritual medicine seeds. Even with a cheating artifact like the space and the jade pendant, in addition to Lin Yi's daily supply of vital energy, the two heart-devouring exquisite grass seeds did not show any signs of germination. According to the sissy manager of the spirit medicine nursery, if everything went smoothly, he would usually see results in 15 to 20 days. Now that half of the time had passed, according to the growth pattern of ordinary plants, they should have started to germinate by now. Now that these seeds were acting recklessly, it made Lin Yi a little anxious. Fortunately, not only did the two heart-devouring exquisite grass seeds not move, the other 78 spiritual medicine seeds in the space in the jade pendant were the same. This made Lin Yi slightly relieved. Although it was still reckless, at least there was a comparison. He could rule out the possibility of the two heart-devouring exquisite grass seeds dying alone, and that was enough. And if the space in the jade pendant was blessed by the heavens, the possibility of all 80 spiritual medicine seeds dying was ridiculous. Lin Yi did not believe it, even if he was beaten to death. If he could not cultivate the spiritual medicine with his current condition, then it would be better for the other newcomers to just give up. No matter how much effort they put in, it would all be in vain. 3 days passed in the blink of an eye. The third round of the newcomer challenge began as scheduled. This round was different from the previous 2 rounds. Although there were many matches between rookies in the previous 2 rounds, there wasn't much to see. Originally, the first round between Meng Tong and Xiao Ran was supposed to be an intense battle. However, in the end, Xiao Ran admitted defeat. As for the second round that followed, there was nothing to write home about. Among the top 5 rookies of Blue Cloud Pavilion, other than Meng Tong, who effortlessly took 3 points from Cha Wu, the other top 4 did not make any moves. All of them were just bystanders, and there was nothing to see. However, in the third round, Lin, Li Zhengming, and Xiao Ran might not make any moves, but there was no doubt that Meng Tong, who was currently ranked second in terms of points, would not make any moves. It was inevitable that he would be fighting against Xiao Hongkai, who was ranked 4th. Although their cave-dwelling rankings were very low, and the stakes were not that high regardless of who won or lost. If it was placed among the other rookies, it wouldn't be anything to see. However, don't forget that these 2 were natural enemies. Both sides had already said that they were not on good terms with each other, but the battle had yet to begin. It was already destined that once the 2 of them faced each other, it would be a battle full of gunpowder. One could even foresee a bloody battle between dragons and tigers. Of course, with Meng Tong's strength in the early stage of foundation establishment against Xiao Hongkai, who is only at heaven stage great perfection, it would be overestimating the latter to say that this battle would be a battle between dragons and tigers. However, there is no doubt that in this battle, Meng Tong would definitely make a move on Xiao Hongkai. The only suspense was whether Xiao Hongkai had the luck and strength to survive under Meng Tong's feet. The third round of the Blue Cloud Pavilion Rookie Challenge officially began. The other rookies tactfully remained silent. They had no intention of stealing the show and quietly waited for the 2 protagonists to come on stage. Meng Tong smiled proudly. He was very satisfied with the respectful performance of the rookies. He immediately strode onto the stage and pointed at Xiao Hongkai. His eyes were filled with killing intent. "Today is the day you die. What's the matter, lumber waist? Do you want me to invite you up here? I say, don't tell me you want to be like that Xiao guy, a coward at the last moment." Meng Gao stood arrogantly on the stage, unbridledly ridiculing. "Then I'm really disappointed. I thought that even though you're a bit useless, you're still a man. I didn't expect to find out that you're actually a woman. That Xiao guy is like this, and you, lumber waist, are like this. No wonder people say that Lin Yi is a lecherous ghost. Don't tell me he likes you guys. Holy shit, that's really hardcore." The rookies in the audience immediately roared with laughter. Meng Tong's mockery was too much of a joke. Unbeknownst to them, this was an excuse that Meng Jueguang had specially given to him. It was to infuriate Xiao Hongkai and make him lose his rationality. If not, this rascal would be like Xiao Ran and become a coward, then it would be meaningless. Although Xiao Hongkai had a straightforward and hot-blooded personality, his actions of challenging Cha Wu was already a cunning attempt to avoid clashing with Meng Tong in the second round. He had to guard against him this time. This was a rare opportunity. Seeing how Lin Yi and company were becoming more and more arrogant by the day, he had to make an example of them and teach them a lesson in blood. Given Xiao Hongcai's usual personality, he would have gone up to him without a second word to be mocked in front of everyone. However, today his expression was surprisingly calm, as usual. Holy shit, this was really the case of one who keeps company with ink being stained black. After spending so much time with Lin Yi, even a piece of trash like lumber waste had learned how to be a poser. Meng Tong and the other rookies were secretly surprised. Following that, they saw Xiao Hongkai greet Lin Yi and company before calmly walking up the stage. In a trance, Meng Tong suddenly felt that the lumber waste in front of him was somewhat different from a few days ago. Although he was still the same person, the feeling he gave was like he had been reborn. It was as though he had completely transformed. However, He could not tell what exactly was different. Fuck, what's there to care about a mere lumber waste? Meng Tong hurriedly threw this strange thought to the back of his head. What he needed to do next was to beat this lumber waste into a dead person. When that happened, he wanted to see if Lin Yi and company could continue acting. After walking up the stage, Xiao Honkai looked at Meng Tong from head to toe and suddenly said, "Rookie Meng, don't tell me you didn't brush your teeth today." Chapter 3785. Unexpectedly, Xiao Honkai said with a straight face, "How is it unrelated? It's because you don't brush your teeth that your breath stinks. You're purposely affecting my mood, causing me to be in a bad mood, causing me to be unable to use my strength. This is cheating." The rookies below the stage could not help but burst into laughter. With lumber waist's straightforward temper, to be able to insult others in such a roundabout manner, it could be considered as exceeding his standard. Fuck, you're the one with bad breath. Your whole family has bad breath. Meng Tong was so angry that his mouth was crooked. If not for the referee watching from below the stage, he would have kicked Xiao Honkai into a pulp. The mysterious pavilion referee could not help but laugh as well. After a short pause, he announced, "Blue Cloud Pavilion Newcomer Challenge Round 3, first match. Abode 13 Meng Tong challenges Abode 12 Xiao Honkai. Begin." With that, Meng Tong immediately increased his speed to the maximum and pounced at Xiao Honkai, not giving him any chance to admit defeat. As an early-stage foundation establishment expert who specialized in the 1,000 kicks technique, Meng Tong's speed was considered one of the best among experts of the same level. In the eyes of the heaven stage perfect perfection Blue Cloud Pavilion rookies, his movement speed was so fast that it was difficult to see with the naked eye. There was no way to defend against it. Many rookies could not help but swallow their saliva. Although they did not think much of Meng Tong's intelligence, he was indeed strong. If they were in Xiao Hongsai's position, they would not even have the chance to beg for mercy, let alone defend. They would probably be swept to death with one kick. Although Xiao Hongsai's strength was slightly stronger than theirs, there was a limit to it. Against Meng Tong's ferocity, there was no other outcome other than death. 1,000 kicks, 21 forms die. Meng Tong suddenly shouted and pushed his movement speed to the maximum. In a flash, he appeared in front of Xiao Honkai. 21,000 legs, this was the true strength of an early-stage foundation establishment cultivator. The energy on his legs was sharp and cold. Thousands of leg shadows shone with a cold light. It was hard to tell what was real and what was fake. Although he didn't use any weapons due to the rules of the competition, the intimidation he gave off was not any weaker than divine weapons. Even the rookies, who were hundreds of feet away, could not help but hold their breaths, their scalps tingling. However, to everyone's surprise, in the face of Meng Tong's ferocious 1,000 legs 21 style, Meng Tong was unable to do anything. Xiao Honkai didn't surrender like everyone expected. She didn't even have the slightest intention of dodging. She just stood there without moving, letting Meng Tong's thousands of leg shadows completely cover her. One had to know that when the 1,000 kicks reached the 21st form, not only did the actual leg possess unparalleled lethality, but even the illusions that seemed to only have a confusing effect were equally lethal. Although it couldn't compare to the most fatal kick, it was still a peak heaven rank powerhouse. If she was hit by these illusions, she would also be seriously injured. If her defense was slightly weaker, she might even die. Is Lumber Waist scared out of his wits? Why isn't he moving? The rookies looked at each other in dismay. Even a cultivator with poor eyesight would be able to tell that this place was dangerous. Xiao Hongsai's motionless posture was no different from waiting for death. If he reacted quickly and dodged immediately, even if he couldn't completely avoid Meng Tong's 1,000 legs, he would at least be able to avoid as many injuries as possible. But at the very least, he would be able to suffer less injuries. In this way, if he could survive the first wave of attacks, he would have a chance to catch his breath. There would always be a chance to say, "I admit defeat." Although serious injuries were unavoidable, if he worked hard, he would still be able to fight for a chance of survival. However, with Xiao Hongsai's foolish behavior, there was no way he could survive. Once Meng Tong's 1,000 kicks 21 forms was over, he would definitely die. If he could leave his corpse intact, it would be a blessing from his ancestors. Now we can prepare to collect this lumber waste corpse. I'll teach you guys a lesson. What happens when you go against me? Meng Jueguang. Meng Jueguang sneered as he looked at Lin Yi and the rest. Ever since Lin Yi came to the Welcome Pavilion, he had repeatedly challenged him, the big senior brother in charge. However, what surprised him was that he had never suffered any substantial losses. Other than the occasional exchange of a few good pieces of jade, Lin Yi was able to create miracles and take advantage of others. Meng Jueguang had almost lost all his face. But now, once Meng Tong killed Xiao Honkai, Lin Yi's underling, on the spot, everything would be fine. At the end of the day, no matter how awesome Lin Yi was, he was just a rookie. In terms of strength and influence, he was not on the same level as Meng Jueguang. The reason why he was able to create a momentum of being on par with him was purely due to his miraculous performance of being undefeated. It was like blowing a bubble, constantly attracting attention. Step by step, he reached the position of the rookie overlord of Blue Cloud Pavilion. However, once this undefeated momentum was stopped, the bubble would instantly burst. Then, Lin Yi, the rookie overlord of Blue Cloud Pavilion, would immediately be beaten back to his original state. At that time, the other rookies would realize that other than being a rookie like them, other than being slightly stronger, he was not even worth a fart. Using the challenge competition as a rare opportunity, allowing Meng Tong to kill Xiao Honkai was the best way to burst this bubble. The more bloody and thunderous the method, the more shocking it would be. Xiao Hongsai's head, which was neither too big nor too small, could be used as a sacrifice. However, to Meng Jueguang's surprise, at that moment, even though Xiao Honkai was about to die, Lin Yi and the rest did not seem worried at all. From their relaxed expressions, it seemed like they had a lot of confidence in Xiao Honkai. A mere heaven stage perfect circle, being covered by Meng Tong's 1,000 kicks 21 style, would not even leave a complete corpse, let alone live. Yet, they still had confidence in Xiao Honkai. These idiots must have been bewitched by a demon. At the same time, on the stage, Xiao Honkai, who was the person in question, faced with the 1,000 kicks that were firmly covering her, finally began to move. Everyone in the audience curled their lips. This guy actually only reacted now. Wasn't he a little too slow? Lumber Waste was indeed Lumber Waste. His nickname was not just for show. Chapter 3786. Not to mention the mood of the audience, Xiao Honkai, who was on the stage, was not in a hurry. Facing Meng Tong's 1,000 heavy leg shadows, he operated his true chi and struck out with his palm. His main martial skill was as straightforward as his personality. It looked ordinary, but it was actually very powerful. It was one of the best martial skills in the cultivation world. It was known as the Cold Iron Palm. Xiao Honkai was an ice attribute cultivator, and this Cold Iron Palm was also one of the ice attribute cultivator's martial skills. Seeing Xiao Hongsai's posture, Meng Tong suddenly laughed. Cold Iron Palm? You dare to use such a useless martial skill? You want to deal with my 1,000 layers of leg shadows? Lumber Waste, you are seeking your own death. Don't blame me for hitting you when you are down. After saying that, the 1,000 layers of leg shadows that surrounded Xiao Honkai suddenly tightened. Not to mention the fact that it was difficult to distinguish the real from the fake. Even if he had guessed correctly and avoided the most fatal kick, the rest of the leg shadows would still be enough to kill a heaven stage full cycle expert. Among all the common martial skills, the Cold Iron Palm's lethality was top-notch, but that was it. Apart from lethality, the other aspects of the Cold Iron Palm could not even be considered as passable. It was especially straightforward and lacked variation. If it could not even hit its target, then what was the use of the martial skill no matter how strong it was? Therefore, the Cold Iron Palm had always been recognized as a useless martial art. Even among the common martial arts, it was considered to be at the bottom of the list. Even the most ordinary martial arts did not have much of a background and resources. Even the weakest martial artists would not be interested in this kind of useless martial art, except for those who had holes in their brains. In comparison, the 1,000 layers of leg shadows that Meng Tong practiced was much better. Whether it was in terms of attack, defense, or speed, it was a rare and excellent choice. There was a world of difference between the two. To put it simply, if the 1,000 kicks and cold iron palms were placed together and 10,000 practitioners were chosen, they would not be able to perform the 1,000 kicks and cold iron palm. At least 9,990 people would choose 1,000 kicks without any hesitation. As for the remaining 10 people, 9 of them would still choose 1,000 kicks after some hesitation. Only the last person would have the chance to consider cold iron palm, but in the end, he would still choose to give up. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that 1,000 kicks wouldn't have an absolute advantage against cold iron palm if they were at the same level, but 1,000 kicks would definitely be able to take the initiative. Under normal circumstances, a cold iron palm expert would only have a powerful lethality. However, he could not even touch the edge of a 1,000-legged expert. He could only be toyed with by his opponent. This was the advantage brought about by martial techniques. Even experts of the same level had such a huge disadvantage, not to mention that one of them was at the peak of heaven stage, while the other was at the early stage of foundation establishment. In the eyes of anyone with common sense, there was no suspense at all in this kind of battle. Lumber Waist was definitely dead this time. This was the thought that popped up in the minds of almost all the Blue Cloud Pavilion rookies below the stage. Of course, except for Lin, Yi, and the others. In the blink of an eye, Xiao Hongcai's simple cold iron palm had already met Meng Tong's 1,000-legged afterimages. There was a huge tremor from the backstage, and a huge golden palm print actually broke through the 1,000-legged afterimages. Bang! A figure flew out in a sorry state. When they saw the person's face clearly, all the rookies below the stage, including Meng Jueguang, were instantly dumbfounded. The figure that was sent flying out in a sorry state. It was actually Meng Tong. Fuck! How could it be Meng Tong? Did they see wrongly? Meng Jueguang and the others unconsciously rubbed their eyes, then looked at the person on the stage who was in a sorry state, but it was still Meng Tong. Only then did they react in disbelief. Just now, Lumber Waist, who was obviously going to die, actually broke through Meng Tong's 1,000-legged 21 styles with one palm, and even backhanded Meng Tong, an early-stage foundation establishment expert, into such a sorry state. It was really shocking. After this shocking face-to-face, Meng Jueguang and the others below the stage were stunned for a long time. Only Lin Yi and the others had expected this scene. Lin Yi realized that his golden finger was still there. Although he couldn't clearly see cultivators who were stronger than him without using the mantra, he could still clearly see the level of cultivators who were weaker or at the same level as him. It was true that a heaven stage, great perfection cold iron palm expert would not have any chance of winning against a foundation establishment realm expert with 1,000 legs. However, what if this cold iron palm expert was also in the foundation establishment realm and had a trick up his sleeve? Everyone else, including Meng Jueguang, had assumed that Trash Xiao was still a heaven stage great circle cultivator that wasn't even worth mentioning. They had never thought that this guy would actually rush to break through to foundation establishment before this round of challenges, and even succeed in breaking through. When they understood this, Meng Jueguang and the others couldn't help but gasp. He knew that in the next round, he would have to face Meng Tong, an early-stage foundation establishment expert, in a short 3 days, but he still dared to rush to the foundation establishment stage in such a short period of time. This Lumber Waist was a fucking lunatic. The audience was still in shock, but at this moment, Meng Tong, who was on the stage, was really shocked. It could even be said that he was horrified. Originally, Meng Tong had thought that he would be able to easily kill a piece of trash that he could step on easily. But in the end, not only was Meng Tong completely unscathed, he had even shattered a mouthful of teeth. This kind of inexplicable result really scared Meng Tong silly. Didn't this trash say, that he was a heaven stage full circle cultivator? How did he suddenly become an early stage foundation establishment expert? Fuck, this is not scientific at all. Don't forget Meng Tong was able to successfully build his foundation not only because he used a foundation establishment pill, but also because he went through Su Lingchong's channel to get a foundation establishment liquid that could only be encountered by luck. Using it together with the foundation establishment pill greatly increased the success rate, which was why he was lucky enough to succeed. But what did a mere lumber waste have? Not to mention foundation establishment liquid. He couldn't even get a foundation establishment pill. How could this kind of trash succeed in building his foundation? This kind of thing couldn't be understood at all. In a short 3 days, a mere heaven stage full circle cultivator was turned into an early stage foundation establishment expert by this trash. This kind of thing was really fucking absurd. Unfortunately, whether or not he could understand it, Meng Tong could at least confirm one thing. His pair of dog eyes had been blinded by lumber waste. While Meng Tong was still in a state of shock, Xiao Honkai suddenly sneered. "What's wrong, newbie Meng? A dignified early-stage foundation establishment expert wouldn't be scared by my useless cold iron palm, right? From the looks of it, the so-called 1,000 legs 21 styles is only SOSO. Chapter 3787. Therefore, even though Meng Tong used all his strength to execute the 1,000 kicks 21 forms in an attempt to kill Xiao Honkai in one move, he was not able to display the true mirage of the 1,000 kicks. Instead, he immediately withdrew his 1,000 kicks, giving Xiao Honkai the opportunity to face him head-on. In terms of direct attacks, there was nothing that could compete with the cold iron palm, and the 1,000 kicks was no exception. The cold iron palm was mediocre in every other aspect, but its frontal lethality was top-notch. However, Meng Tong didn't do anything and directly confronted his opponent head-on. It would be unreasonable if he wasn't beaten up. In the end, it was not that the 1,000 kicks lost to the cold iron palm. In this exchange, Meng Tong suffered a loss because he underestimated his opponent. He thought that killing Xiao Honkai would be easy and enjoyable. He would save some of his true chi so he could go back and cultivate the spiritual medicine seeds. Just SOSO. Meng Tong finally reacted and sneered. "Lumber waste, don't think that just because I was careless and let you take advantage of me, you can really ride on my head and shit on me. Let me tell you, you're trash. Don't even think about turning over a new leaf. So what if you're in the early stage of the foundation establishment stage? You think I can't kill you? You're too naive." After saying that, Meng Tong jumped up again and used his body movement to the extreme, charging straight at Xiao Honkai. In that unexpected exchange, although Meng Tong was caught off guard and was slightly injured, he still used the 1,000 kicks 21 forms to fight against Xiao Honkai's cold iron palm. Even if it was not as strong, it was enough to offset most of the cold iron palm's power. Therefore, at this moment, his injuries were not serious, and he still had the strength to fight. Then show me how you kill me." Xiao Honkai replied with a sneer, seeing that Meng Tong was so angry that he began to risk his life. Xiao Honkai once again created layers of leg shadows to cover himself, but his response at this moment once again made everyone's jaws drop. Chi sank to the dantian. No matter how many leg shadows Meng Tong created in all directions, Xiao Honkai didn't care about them in the slightest. It gave people the impression that Xiao Honkai didn't care about Meng Tong's 1,000 kicks at all. The only thing he needed to do was to find an opportunity to use the 21st style of the cold iron palm. Clumsy and unable to adapt. Moreover, the cold iron palm's most fatal flaw was its slow execution speed. If it was in another situation, it would be fine. However, in a one-on-one match, the cold iron palm was definitely at a disadvantage. Xiao Hongsai's response might seem stupid, but he had no other choice. If he really followed Meng Tong's footsteps, he would definitely die. He reckoned that he would make himself dizzy from all the spinning. This was simply crippling his own martial arts. In the end, it was extremely likely that he wouldn't even be able to use the cold iron palm. But right now, he was defending his own territory and waiting for Meng Tong to come to him. Although this strategy seemed to be a helpless one, it was a passive one. But it might not be useless. Huh, you dare to fight me with this stupid look? Do you know how pigs die, lumber waste? Meng Tong used his 1,000 kicks to confuse his opponent, causing him to be at a loss for what to do. How pigs die? I don't know, but let's see how you die. Then we'll know. Xiao Honkai replied calmly. Oomph, stubborn. Meng Tong snorted coldly. With a thought, a few indistinguishable leg shadows swept towards Xiao Honkai. However, Xiao Honkai didn't move. He forcefully endured the attacks of these phantoms, but he still maintained the same posture, ready to attack. Although the 21st form of the 1,000 legs did not cause light damage, for a foundational level expert like Xiao Honkai, it wasn't to the point where it would hurt his muscles and bones. Meng Tong couldn't help but be stunned. When the 1,000 legs reached the 21st form of the 1,000 legs, even the 1,000 leg shadows had a lot of power. Therefore, it was difficult to tell which leg shadows were real and which were fake. Other than himself, his opponent had no way of determining which leg shadows were real and which were fake. There were only two ways to deal with the 1,000 legs. One was to use a more powerful martial arts technique to destroy all the leg shadows, and the other was to guess. There was no other way. However, looking at Xiao Hongsai's unshakable posture, Meng Tong couldn't help but feel a little puzzled. Could it be that this guy had a way to distinguish which leg shadows were real and which were fake? Otherwise, if he didn't determine that the leg shadows were fake, how could he be so unscrupulous and ignore them? One had to know that the 21st form of the 1,000 legs was performed by a foundational level expert. Even if the 1,000 legs was slightly weaker than the cold iron palm, the difference was still limited. If one was hit by a real leg, even if one didn't die, they would be seriously injured. This was not a joke. No matter how many times Meng Tong tried to test the waters, Xiao Honkai didn't move at all. Even after Meng Tong threw a few more kicks at him, he didn't move at all. He gave off the feeling that he was an old monk in meditation, completely isolated from the outside world. Meng Tong couldn't help but be suspicious. He tested the waters a dozen times, and even used his real leg to sweep past the back of Xiao Hongsai's head a few times, but Xiao Honkai still didn't move. Only then did Meng Tong's heart calm down. It turned out that this trash Xiao was just putting on an act. He was just imitating their pretentious leader to act pretentious. In fact, he simply couldn't tell whether his leg shadows were real or fake. To think that he actually thought that this guy had some sort of superior move to deal with his 1,000 kicks. But thinking about it carefully, the 1,000 kicks was recognized by the entire cultivation world as a top-notch martial skill. At least among the common martial skills, it was absolutely first-rate. Whether it was in terms of offense, defense, or confusion, once it was fully used, it would be an invincible existence. How could Xiao Hong, who was just an idiot, handle it with his cold iron palm? Fuck, I was just being careless. After being tricked by this trash, I thought too much. After understanding this point, Meng Tong once again laughed wildly. In the end, a trash will always be a trash. Even if he was lucky enough to reach the foundation building stage, he still couldn't escape the fate of being stepped on by me. Because the 1,000-leg shadow had once again surrounded Xiao Honkai, Xiao Honkai had fallen into an absolute passive position. As long as Xiao Honkai didn't make a move, he could only foolishly stand there, not daring to make any other moves. Because once he moved, even if it was just a feint, he would inevitably reveal a flaw. After all, the cold iron palm couldn't be like the 1,000-leg shadow, which could perfectly combine fake and real. With its clumsy movements, it was impossible to deceive an expert of the same level. Chapter 3788. Bam, bam, bam. In the blink of an eye, another 3-leg shadows swept towards Xiao Honkai from 3 completely different directions. Xiao Honkai once again took it all in like before. With a muffled grunt, she endured it without moving an inch. This piece of trash was really a piece of trash that could only wait for death. It was only at this moment that Meng Tong finally let down his guard. Once bitten, twice shy. Although Meng Tong said that he did not take Xiao Honkai seriously, to be honest, even with Meng Tong's arrogance, he could not help but feel a lingering fear after the previous encounter. Even though he knew that he had the upper hand, he did not dare to be as arrogant as before. In fact, he had been very careful until now. However, after so many tests, Meng Tong could already be sure that even if this lumber waste succeeded in building his foundation, he was just a piece of trash in the early stage of foundation building. Apart from being tricked just now, the rest of the time, lumber waste had no power to resist him at all. He could totally step on him without worry. Go to hell. After preparing for a long time, Meng Tong's most fatal killing move finally arrived. Although the 1,000 kicks 21 forms could create 1,000 leg shadows, in the end, only the last leg was the most powerful killing move. Bam! A muffled sound of bodies colliding with each other was heard. The 1,000 leg shadows dissipated instantly. The audience could clearly see that Meng Tong's leg had already landed on Xiao Hongsai's chest. There was no resistance, no defense. In such a situation, normal people would know that the chest was the most heavily guarded and the most difficult part to attack. If others were in Meng Tong's position, they would definitely kick at the back of the heart or even the back of the head. However, Meng Tong did the opposite. It actually had a miraculous effect. Xiao Honkai paused for a moment, then suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood. It was a shocking sight. Even if his boss, Lin Yi, is a poser, he wouldn't be able to take Meng Tong's 1,000 legs 21 styles head on. Not to mention that he's just a lackey who's just built his foundation. He's really reckless. Meng Jueguang couldn't help but feel happy when he saw this scene. The shock he felt when he found out that Xiao Honkai was in the early stage of foundation establishment disappeared instantly, and he felt relaxed. The scene of lumber waste spewing blood was a little horrifying. However, in Meng Jueguang's eyes, it was pleasing to the eye no matter how he looked at it. Not to mention spitting out a mouthful of blood. He wanted this lumber waste to spit out a whole vat of blood for 10 miles. Not only Meng Jueguang, anyone with discerning eyes could see that in this face-to-face encounter, Meng Tong definitely had the upper hand. Xiao Honkai, who had just built his foundation, was in the early stage of foundation establishment. Without any resistance, he was directly hit in the chest. It was already amazing that he was able to hold on and not die. He was seriously injured. Will junior brother Xiao be all right? The bitter senior brother below the stage immediately became nervous. Although the news of Xiao Hongsai's success in building his foundation before the battle gave him a big surprise, even if he succeeded in building his foundation, his strength and realm had not been stabilized. He might not be Meng Tong's opponent. Even though Xiao Honkai was still standing, he was seriously injured. If he didn't quickly admit defeat, he wouldn't be able to survive. If he didn't quickly admit defeat, Meng Tong would definitely not let go of this opportunity to cut the weeds and eliminate the roots. If it was said that Xiao Honkai was still in the heaven stage great perfection, even if Meng Tong wanted to kill him, it was only because he listened to Meng Jueguang's words. In fact, he didn't take him seriously. But now that he found out that this trash had actually built his foundation, it was completely different. For Meng Tong, a heaven stage great perfection Xiao Honkai and an early stage foundation establishment Xiao Honkai were completely different concepts. The former could be trampled on, but the latter must be killed as soon as possible. Otherwise, a long delay would bring trouble. Both of them were at the same level, and he might be counterattacked by the opponent. I feel fine. Senior brother Ku, let's wait and see. Honkai is not so easy to deal with. Lin Yi smiled faintly, without a trace of worry on his face. If Xiao Honkai failed to build his foundation, then he might really be worried. But now, Xiao Honkai was an early-stage foundation establishment expert. Even if he was seriously injured, it would still be difficult for Meng Tong to kill him. As long as he didn't die on the spot, no matter how serious his injuries were, He was confident that he could recover in a short period of time, so there was nothing to worry about. Moreover, although it seemed that Xiao Honkai was seriously injured and Meng Tong had the absolute upper hand, was that really the case? At least, in Lin Yi's opinion, it was far from the truth. As expected, before Lin Yi finished his sentence, Xiao Honkai suddenly opened his mouth and said, "Newcomer Meng, do you think you can defeat me like this?" What? What kind of stupid question is that? Lumber Waist, have you been kicked silly or something? Do you think you have a chance to turn defeat into victory? Meng Tong laughed out loud. Even now, his feet were still firmly planted on Xiao Hongsai's chest. If he exerted a little more force, Xiao Honkai would continue to vomit blood. He could even hear the sound of his sternum breaking. Turn defeat into victory? Xiao Hongsai's face was pale, and his mouth was full of blood. Suddenly, he smiled ferociously. "I have never been defeated before. How can I turn defeat into victory? But Newcomer Meng, you have reminded me. Don't worry, I won't give you such a chance." Meng Tong was stunned. When he came to his senses, he was about to mock her, but he found that he had no chance at all, because Xiao Honkai suddenly made a move. Bang! With lightning speed, Xiao Hongsai's cold iron palm, which he had been preparing for a long time, was finally thrown out. Meng Tong was completely unprepared, and one of his legs even landed on his chest. He was simply a live target, and it was too late for him to escape. Although Cold Iron Palm was widely recognized as a useless martial art technique, it was extremely clumsy and could not hit anyone under normal circumstances. But once it hit someone, it would really be fatal. As soon as the palm hit, everyone heard a bone-cracking sound that made their scalps tingle. Amidst the exclamations of disbelief, Meng Tong's entire body was directly sent flying and fell on the edge of the arena. His body was a bloody mess. Even an experienced guy like Meng Jueguang couldn't help but gasp when he saw this scene. He murmured, "This Lumber Waist is really fucking ruthless." Anyone could tell that Xiao Hongsai's palm strike had been premeditated for a long time. If it could be said that Meng Tong had only been careless and had been tricked by Xiao Honkai in the first exchange, then this exchange was where Xiao Honkai truly displayed his strength. Chapter 3789. In order to hit Meng Tong with his final palm strike, he had suffered the injuries of so many afterimages of Meng Tong's 1,000 kicks. This fellow had not uttered a single word, and had even directly taken the full damage of Meng Tong's 1,000 kicks 21 style. First injuring a few, then injuring the enemy. Only then did Meng Tong seize this opportunity. For an expert in the early stage of the Foundation Establishment realm who had just entered the Foundation Establishment realm, once he was hit by the 1,000 kicks 21 styles, the result would be fatal. In other words, Xiao Hongsai's strategy of injuring a few before injuring the enemy might not even have a chance to fight back. He would be killed first. This possibility was not small. Moreover, even if Xiao Honkai could survive Meng Tong's 1,000 kicks 21 styles, he might not be able to find a chance to fight back. Because if he took the full brunt of the 1,000 kicks 21 styles, he would be seriously injured. Once his tendons and veins were damaged, he would not be able to circulate his true chi. No matter how long he prepared his cold iron palm, he would not be able to use it, let alone fight back. However, even though he knew that his chances of winning were slim, Xiao Honkai still did not hesitate to gamble. If it was any other normal person, if they were not forced into a desperate situation, they would not gamble like a desperate gambler. Was there a hole in their brain? He was ruthless to others, but he was even more ruthless to himself. Although this Lumber Waist looked vulnerable, he was actually a ruthless person. You really can't judge a book by its cover. At this moment, on the stage, Meng Tong had taken the full brunt of the Cold Iron Palm's 21 styles. His face was pale as paper, and he kept vomiting blood. Although it seemed that he would not die for a while, he did not even have the strength to say a word, wanting him to stand up and fight again. On the other hand, Xiao Honkai had relied on an extremely patient counterattack to completely reverse the situation in an instant, and he had even almost succeeded in killing Meng Tong with a single move. Such a magnificent feat had truly blinded the eyes of everyone present. It was no exaggeration to say that after today's fight, Xiao Honkai would definitely become famous. As for the nickname Lumberwaist, from then on, they would be cut off from him. If he was Lumberwaist, then what about Meng Jueguang's Meng Tong? An idiot who couldn't even defeat a piece of trash? Lin Yi and the rest looked at each other, their faces filled with satisfaction. Xiao Hongsai's hidden trump card was too satisfying. What did I say before? I said that Junior Marshal Brother Xiao was just like all of you, that he wasn't an ordinary person. See, I was right. Senior Marshal Brother Ku Bai was so surprised that he was incoherent. These years of bitter life had taught him a bloody lesson. That was, no matter where you went, you would suffer if you didn't have the strength. No matter what good things happened, you had to stand aside. And no matter what bad things happened, you had to take the blame. At the end of the day, there was an old saying that lagging behind meant getting beaten up. In the world of cultivation, the only standard to measure the right to speak was strength. If one was strong, then everything would be easy to negotiate. But if they were not strong enough, then they could only die. Senior Brother Ku Bai had a deep understanding of this. Previously, Lin Yi was already able to compete with Meng Jueguang. Now, Xiao Honkai was showing signs of becoming the #1 expert. If Xiao Ran was included, they would be able to speak and do things with confidence in the future. Just as Senior Brother was being forced to speak, Xiao Honkai, who had sent Meng Tong flying with a palm strike on the stage, was still moving towards Meng Tong step by step, even though her face was even paler than before. The crowd below the stage exclaimed in surprise. Junior Brother Xiao, this is your plan? The bitter Senior Brother was a little confused. He had vaguely guessed what Xiao Honkai wanted to do, but he didn't dare to believe that this guy actually had such great courage and ruthlessness. Evil must be eradicated. Since they don't intend to leave Honkai alive, we naturally don't need to care about their feelings. Indecisiveness will only lead to trouble. When dealing with enemies like this, we have to step on them ruthlessly until they die. Senior Brother Ku, you should understand this principle, right? Lin Yi said calmly. In the past, Lin Yi could not be ruthless, so he left Kong Ming Ming, the hidden danger. Now, Lin Yi had matured a lot, so he naturally understood a lot of things. Yes, of course I know. The bitter Senior Brother nodded repeatedly. How could he not understand this principle? However, he had always been the one being stepped on. Why had he ever grasped this kind of initiative? Just like how Meng Jueguang deliberately planned to let Meng Tong kill Xiao Honkai to deal a blow to Lin Yi. If Xiao Honkai was able to kill Meng Tong in today's battle, then the blow to Meng Jueguang would be equally huge. Don't forget, Meng Tong was the only newcomer that Meng Jueguang had promoted so far. If even he ended up being killed, then the other newcomers of Blue Cloud Pavilion could not be counted on at all. At that time, Lin Yi would probably not even need to wave his hand, and they would take the initiative to defect to him. While they were talking, Xiao Honkai had already walked step by step to the front of Meng Tong under everyone's watchful eyes. Then, she raised her palm with a murderous look. Looking at Xiao Hongsai's fierce look, Meng Tong was so scared that he wet his pants on the spot. Fuck, this is not right. Today, we agreed to trample him to death easily. How did it suddenly turn out like this? I'm the meat on the chopping block. In the blink of an eye, how did the position change completely? However, Meng Tong had just been hit by the 21st style of the cold iron palm. Now, he was almost in a state of near death. Being able to hang on to his last breath was already the best he could do. Not to mention moving, even opening his mouth to speak was a luxury. In this situation, if Xiao Honkai were to kill him, not only would Meng Tong not be able to dodge, he would not even be able to open his mouth to surrender. He could only lie on the ground in this extremely twisted position, waiting for death. At this moment, not only was Meng Tong scared to the point of peeing, but Meng Jueguang, who was in the audience, was also frightened. If Xiao Honkai really succeeded, then not only would Meng Tong die, but he, Meng Jueguang, would also suffer a heavy loss. However, according to the rules of the newcomer challenge, Other than the two on the stage voluntarily admitting defeat, no one else was allowed to interfere. In other words, unless Meng Tong took the initiative to surrender, even Meng Jiuguang, the big senior brother, could not save him. He could only watch as he was beaten to death. Meng Tong wanted to take the initiative to surrender, but the most fatal problem was that he could not open his mouth at all. At the moment, the only person who could decide whether Meng Tong lived or died was Xiao Honkai. No one else, including the referee, could stop him. Chapter 3790. Meng Tong mumbled in horror for a while, only to see his throat squirm. In a hurry, a mouthful of blood suddenly blocked his throat, making him unable to speak at all. His originally bloodless face instantly became even paler. Even if it was an early-stage Foundation establishment expert, when his life was truly in the hands of others, he would not be any more tenacious than an ordinary person. On the contrary, the higher the person was, the more fragile he would be in such a situation. This was because the higher he climbed, the harder he fell. He would lose far more than an ordinary person. Accustomed to Meng Tong's arrogance and disregard for the other newcomers of Blue Cloud Pavilion, Xiao Hongsai's insufferably arrogant behavior, compared to his current pathetic and lowly appearance, made Xiao Honkai laugh. Sure enough, people are cheap. If you think too highly of yourself, in the end, you will find out that you are not even a fart. Looks like newcomer Meng Tong has nothing else to say. Then, this trash will reluctantly send you on your way. If you have any words in the future, remember to call me in my dreams. Xiao Honkai sneered and immediately gathered vital energy on her palm, preparing to send Meng Tong on his way. In an instant, it was as if time had frozen. Everyone did not even dare to breathe too loudly. Their eyes were glued to Xiao Hongsai's movements, and they could not help but swallow their saliva. As for Meng Jiuguang, his face was so gloomy that it could drip water, but there was nothing he could do. Murder and arson were nothing new in the world of cultivation. Back then, when more than 1,000 people from the Qiushui Manor were silenced, it was only a topic of gossip. In comparison, only a handful of people would die in the newcomer challenge. There was nothing worth paying attention to. However, this was indeed the first time they had seen someone die in the Welcome Pavilion. This was the first time someone had died. Furthermore, it was the final stab in front of all the rookies. This was an unprecedented precedent. Today, after killing Meng Tong, Xiao Honkai would definitely replace him and become the dark horse of this year's Blue Cloud Pavilion newcomers. She would become a fearsome demon under Lin Yi. Go in peace. Xiao Honkai sneered and struck Meng Tong with the 20th form of the cold iron palm. Everyone's heart skipped a beat. His heart instantly leaped to his throat. Seeing that Meng Tong was about to die under the iron palm, Xiao Hongsai's iron palm suddenly stopped, less than 10 centimeters away from Meng Tong's forehead. Holy shit, what is Lumber Waist trying to do? That palm strike was clearly enough to subdue him, but he stopped at the last moment. Wasn't this a joke? Meng Jiuguang's face was as black as the bottom of a pot. Meng Tong's death was an unacceptable blow to him. If this old cat Xiao Honkai continued to tease him like a mouse, then his face would be completely lost. In the future, he wouldn't even be able to lift his head when he saw other new disciples of Clear Cloud Pavilion. However, just as Meng Jiuguang was about to explode, Xiao Honkai suddenly groaned. She fell to the ground with a mouthful of blood. She struggled for a long time, but could not get up. Holy shit, I was so scared that I was on tenterhooks. It turns out that this piece of trash is just a piece of trash who is outwardly strong, but inwardly weak. Sure enough, a piece of trash is a piece of trash. Meng Jiuguang was the first to react and was immediately overjoyed. He allowed a long sigh of relief with lingering fear. The other newcomers also started discussing. As for Lin Yi and company, they could not help but look at each other. It was not easy for them to make it to the last step, but they did not expect it to be for naught. In fact, thinking about it, it was a miracle that Xiao Honkai could last until now. Not only did he suffer the full damage of Meng Tong's 1000 Kicks 21 styles, but he also endured the serious injury and forcefully used the cold iron palm 21 styles. If it was any other ordinary early-stage foundation establishment expert, perhaps they would have already collapsed. To be able to hold on until now, Xiao Hongcai's feat could already be called a man of iron and blood. This time, not only did the newcomers below the stage burst into an uproar, even the referee from Mysterious Pavilion did not know what to do. On both sides, Xiao Hongcai and Meng Tong were both seriously injured and could not move. Neither could do anything to the other. Although the two of them were not far from death, they could not help each other. They could only stand in this awkward stalemate. What should we do now? The bitter senior and Lin Yi looked at each other and shook their heads in unison. According to the rules of the newcomer challenge, the results could only be decided by the two sides. No one else had the right to interfere. However, the situation was troublesome. Both of them could not move. Meng Tong could not even speak for a while. As for Xiao Hongcai, although she could speak, she could not take the initiative to admit defeat. The two of them could not do anything to the other. They could only continue to waste time like this. However, when would it end if they continued to waste time like this? The other newcomers were still waiting to challenge them. What's more, although Xiao Hongcai and Meng Tong were still hanging on to their last breaths, they weren't in a good condition. If they continued to fight like this, they might both die in the ring. That would be hilarious. It had not even been 2 months. Newcomers who were able to reach the foundation establishment stage were rare stocks with great potential, especially in Blue Cloud Pavilion. Especially since both of them were foundation establishment cultivators. If they were to let these two rookies with great potential die in the arena, it would be a huge problem. The so-called newcomer assessment system would be criticized to the point of no return. However, the rules of the newcomer challenge had been approved by the elders. Including the referee, no one present could interfere. Otherwise, they would be severely punished. If there was a stain on their record, it would be too bad. Helpless, the Mysterious Pavilion's referee could only ask Meng Jueguang to invite the pavilion master, Hu Yinfeng. Although Hu Yinfeng did not have the right to interfere with the newcomer challenge, he was still the pavilion master of the welcoming pavilion, so he could more or less make a decision. After Hu Yinfeng was invited, he saw that Xiao Hongcai and Meng Tong were in a stalemate. He was speechless and shook his head. He could not say a word for a long time. To be honest, he had spent a lot of time and effort on this rookie assessment system. He had considered all aspects and was counting on this as a political achievement. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to get the approval of the big shots in the Elder Council. However, this situation had never been taken into consideration. Other than the ban on weapons, there were no other restrictions. Under such loose rules, a duel between cultivators could result in a situation where both sides were injured and neither could do anything to the other. This was simply unbelievable. Chapter 3791. Although he was biased towards Meng Jueguang and Meng Tong, he was still the pavilion master of the Welcome Pavilion after all. He couldn't be too biased in front of everyone. In this situation, he couldn't judge Xiao Hongcai as the winner and Meng Tong as the winner. At most, it could be considered a draw. Although Meng Jueguang was only a senior in charge now, Hu Yinfeng had his own information channels. He already knew that Su Lingqiong planned to support Meng Jueguang. In this way, both of them could be considered as Su Lingqiong's people. In the future, they would be under the same faction, so they had to be more courteous to each other. A draw. Meng Jueguang was stunned. He purposely lowered his voice so that the people around didn't hear it. For Hu Yinfeng, the pavilion master, to declare this match a draw would show his objective and fair image. After all, everyone could see that Xiao Hongcai and Meng Tong fought to such an extent. It was naturally reasonable to say that it was a draw. No one could find fault with it. However, his suggestion just now was made to Meng Jueguang in private. This meant that if Meng Jueguang had any objections, there was still a chance to turn things around. Meng Jueguang was an experienced and astute person. He naturally could not see the knack in this. Hu Yinfeng was leaving some leeway for him and was prepared to take the opportunity to do him a favor. He wouldn't even dare to think of such a thing in the past. After all, Hu Yunfeng was the pavilion master of the Welcome Pavilion, while he, Meng Jueguang, was just a small senior in charge. There was a huge difference in their statuses. Furthermore, they had a true superior and subordinate relationship. If there was anything, Hu Yunfeng would just give an order and it would be over. How would it be possible for Hu Yunfeng to discuss with him politely? Indeed, one had to look at the master before beating a dog. With young master Su Lingchong backing him up, the treatment was indeed different. Based on this situation, if he were to take the position of the third pavilion master in the future, even the high and mighty pavilion master Hu Yunfeng had to address him as a brother and hand over his arm. Meng Jueguang was secretly pleased. He thought for a moment before saying, "Lord Pavilion Master, the newcomer assessment's rules don't have the word tie in it. After all, this rule was approved by the Elders Guild. If we were to change it in private, I'm afraid we'll be said to be disrespectful to the higher-ups and attract gossip. We are martial artists. There's no first place in literature and no second place in martial arts. This is the principle. That's not wrong, but this matter has to be dealt with in a timely manner. If this drags on and something happens to the two newcomers on stage, it will be difficult for you and me to explain to the higher-ups." Hu Yunfeng said hesitantly. Indeed. Directly adding the never-before-seen word of a draw without the approval of the higher-ups was more or less risky. However, if it continued to drag on like this and allowed Qiao Hongkai and Meng Tong, two newcomers with potential in the early stage of the building foundation stage, to be exhausted to death, then the consequences of this matter would be far more serious than the former. At that time, once this matter was seized by people with ulterior motives, it could be used to build momentum. Then he, Hu Yunfeng, as the pavilion master of the welcoming pavilion, would inevitably be labeled as incompetent and incompetent. This was not a joke. Being dismissed on the spot was already a light punishment. It might even alarm the law enforcement hall. Once those shameful things on his body were dug out, if that happened, it would be difficult for Hu Yunfeng to not die. Thus, even if he had to bear the risk of being gossiped about by others, Hu Yunfeng had to quickly end this battle where both sides would suffer. After all, it wasn't like he didn't have people at the higher-ups. As long as he didn't alarm those fiends in the law enforcement hall, it wouldn't be a big problem for him to be gossiped about. Hearing this, Meng Jueguang rolled his eyes and said, "Lord Pavilion Master, actually I have an idea. There's no need to drag on like this, and there's no need to use the never-before-seen word tie in the rules. There's no need to take any risks. Moreover, there's evidence, so no one can find fault with it." "Oh." Then Jueguang quickly say it. Hu Yunfeng's eyes couldn't help but light up. If he could have the best of both worlds, it would be the best for him. Meng Jueguang chuckled and immediately went over. He said this and that in a low voice, causing Hu Yunfeng to nod his head and slap the table in praise. The two of them secretly planned for a while. Then, Hu Yunfeng walked onto the stage and announced to the crowd, "Due to the special circumstances of this battle, both rookies are injured and have lost the ability to move. There's no point in continuing to waste time like this. It might even cause our welcoming pavilion to lose two rookies with potential. Thus, I, the pavilion master, have decided to stop this battle in the name of the pavilion master of the welcoming pavilion." These words didn't cause any controversy. Everyone, including Lin, Yi, and the others, knew that this was the inevitable result. Otherwise, if they allowed Qiao Hongkai and Meng Tong to continue wasting time, Hu Yunfeng's position as pavilion master would probably come to an end. However, the next few words that Hu Yunfeng said caused an uproar among the crowd. However, even though both sides are injured and no one could do anything to the other, the newcomer challenge competition has never had a draw. A loss is a loss, and a win is a win. According to the rules, the challenger with a lower rank in the cave abode is naturally the weaker party. Even if it's a draw, it could be said that the weaker party has defeated the stronger party. Our welcoming pavilion has always advocated not fearing the stronger party and facing difficulties head-on. Thus, I, the pavilion master, announced that the winner of this battle is Meng Tong from Cave Abode number 13. Hu Yinfeng said righteously. Count Meng Tong as the winner? The crowd was stunned. After they recovered from their shock, there was an uproar and a flurry of discussion. Although Hu Yunfeng's words, in theory, there was nothing to nitpick about. After all, according to the rules of the Newcomer Challenge competition, the challenger couldn't drag the time and had to make the first move within the time it takes to burn a stick of incense. However, everyone could see that in this battle, Xiao Honkai had obviously turned the tables and gained the upper hand. If they had to give an explanation, it would be more reasonable to say that both sides were injured. However, Hu Yinfeng had directly judged that he had lost to Meng Tong. This was obviously unfair to Xiao Honkai. Of course, this matter didn't concern them. The others would at most watch the commotion and discuss it. It wouldn't cause any disturbance. However, as the boss of Xiao Honkai, Lin Yi wouldn't just watch his little brother suffer. Pavilion Master Hu, forgive me for being curious, but have you ever seen a battle where the winner lies on the ground, not knowing if he's dead or alive, while the loser is still standing on the stage? Lin Yi slowly walked to the edge of the arena, raising an eyebrow as he asked. At this moment, after hearing Hu Yunfeng's announcement, Meng Tong let out a sigh of relief and fainted. On the other hand, Xiao Honkai, who was judged to be the loser, forced himself to stand up. Chapter 3792. After being slapped in the face by a rookie like Lin Yi, Hu Yinfeng was immediately put on the spot. Although Meng Juiguang's suggestion sounded reasonable, the situation in front of him was really embarrassing. This feeling was like a referee blowing a whistle against his conscience, only to be exposed on the spot. Even with Hu Yunfeng's thick skin, he could not help but feel ashamed. This Meng Tong was really useless. Would it kill him to grit his teeth and hold on a little longer? Why did he have to fall so quickly? Didn't he see that Xiao Honkai could still stand up? But no matter how embarrassed he was, words that he had said were like water that had been spilled. No matter how ironic the situation was, he could only bite the bullet and hold on. Your name is Lin Yi, right? A rookie dares to criticize this pavilion master's decision. Didn't the steward teach you the rules of the Welcome Pavilion? Hu Yinfeng looked coldly at Lin Yi and reprimanded him harshly. After pausing for a moment, Hu Yinfeng continued, "But since you've asked, I'll reluctantly answer your question in front of so many people. Just now is just now, and now is now. Regardless of whether they are standing or kneeling, at least when this pavilion master announced the decision, neither of them could stand up. Do you have any objections?" The audience looked at each other when they heard this. Although Hu Yunfeng's words were full of vigor, the content was pure sophistry. Everyone knew that the rules of the Rookie Challenge competition were to ensure fairness. The most basic and core concept was that the winner had to be decided by the contestants themselves, including the referee. No one was allowed to interfere for any reason. And in this lose-lose match, although Hu Yinfeng had no choice but to interfere, he had to minimize the interference to the outcome of the match. However, it was necessary to minimize the interference to the outcome of the competition. And the result was clearly a black whistle. He did not hesitate to favor Meng Tong, which clearly went against the original intent of the Rookie Challenge. His words could be said to be sophistry, but it was not an exaggeration. Lin Yi couldn't help but laugh coldly. He was about to retort, but unexpectedly, Xiao Honkai forced herself to walk down the stage. He gave Lin Yi a look, indicating that there was no need to continue arguing with Hu Yinfeng. Although he was very grateful to Lin Yi for standing up for him, he also knew that with the difference in status and identity between them, this kind of reasoning wouldn't yield any results. Even if he, Boss Lin Yi, was strong and powerful, it couldn't change the fact that he was still a newcomer in the Clear Cloud Pavilion. A mere newcomer of Blue Cloud Pavilion dared to argue with the pavilion master of the Welcoming Pavilion. No matter how righteous he was, it was useless. The result was already determined. Lin Yi was well aware of this. Since Xiao Honkai had the same intention, there was no need for him to continue being entangled with Hu Yinfeng. She had to let Xiao Honkai vent her anger on herself. As for Hu Yinfeng, Lin Yi wasn't in a hurry. In the common world, there were many powerful people who had been stepped on by him. He wasn't in a hurry. A hero shouldn't be afraid of a weak background. This was also applicable on Sky-class Island. Was Zhang Liju a newcomer from the common world? But what would happen in the end? Ku Shixiao, you go back with Honkai first. I'll come over to heal him later. Lin Yi said to Ku Shixiao. Although Qiao Honkai was heavily injured, Lin Yi was 100% sure that he could heal him in a short period of time. But Lin Yi was 100% sure that he'd be able to make a full recovery in a short amount of time. The challenge wasn't over yet, however, and Lin Yi and Xiao Ran had to stay here. Ku Shixiao and the others froze. They knew that Lin Yi was an elixir refiner, but they had never heard that he could heal people. He could concoct elixirs and heal wounds. Was Lin Yi heading in the direction of Miracle Doctor Dan St. Zhang Liju? Although they were confused, Ku Shixiao and the others didn't ask. As far as they were concerned, Lin Yi probably had a 4th level Supreme level elixir or a 5th level Supreme level elixir in his hands. Ku Shixiao nodded at Lin Yi and left with Xiao Honkai. Lin Yi and the others stopped protesting. With that, the duel between Xiao Honkai and Meng Tong was finished. Although it was a lose-lose situation, Meng Tong took advantage of Hu Yunfeng's favoritism. He took 4 points from Xiao Honkai and took the 12th cave. Boss, what do you think if I challenge Meng Tong now? Xiao Ran suggested. Meng Tong was unconscious now, and even if he woke up, he would be useless. If Xiao Ran were to challenge him now, Meng Tong's only choice would be to surrender. Otherwise, for the sake of Xiao Honkai, even an honest man like Xiao Ran wouldn't mind sending him on his way. On top of that, Meng Tong was currently residing in the 12th dwelling at the foot of the mountain. In the entire clear cloud pavilion, other than the heavily injured Xiao Honkai, the only people who could challenge him were Chao Wu in the 14th dwelling and Xiao Ran in the 15th dwelling. If Xiao Ran proposed to challenge Meng Tong, it would be reasonable. Even if Meng Jueguang and the others pulled Pavilion Master Hu Yunfeng over, it would be useless. They wouldn't be able to find any reason to stop Xiao Ran. Unexpectedly, Lin Yi smiled indifferently and said, "Let's leave this resentment to Honkai in the next round. Just follow the original plan and fight your way up one cave at a time. Not only will you not waste your points, but you might even make Meng Tong cry even more." Xiao Ran was stunned. Looking at Lin Yi's mysterious smile, he thought for a moment and smiled knowingly. Then I know what to do. The reason was very simple. If he challenged Meng Tong now, it would indeed be hitting him while he was down, and he would be able to help Xiao Honkai vent her resentment. But there would be a side effect, and that was Meng Tong would jump back to the 15th cave. In this way, as long as Meng Tong admitted defeat and took out the 4 points he had just obtained, he would be able to buy the 15th cave, which was an excellent safe haven. As long as he didn't challenge Meng Tong, no one would be able to disturb him. Such an outcome was obviously not what Lin Yi and the others wanted to see. Before making Meng Tong pay a heavy enough lesson, how could they let him off so easily? Not to mention Xiao Honkai. Even Lin Yi wouldn't agree to this. On the surface, Hu Yunfeng's decision to side with Meng Tong did seem to give Meng Tong a great advantage. But in a sense, it was equivalent to pushing him into a pit of fire at the same time. Chapter 3793. After the bloody battle between Xiao Honkai and Meng Tong in the Blue Cloud Pavilion Newcomer Challenge, the third round continued. This time, the challenger was Xiao Ran. Xiao Ran from the 15th abode of the mountain, challenged Chao Wu from the 14th abode of the mountain. Xiao Ran announced in a clear voice after he walked into the ring. As soon as he said that, there was an uproar among the newcomers. Meanwhile, Meng Jueguang and Meng Tong, who had just woken up, could not help but heave a sigh of relief. In their eyes, Xiao Ran, as Qiao Hongsai's accomplice, had watched as Qiao Honkai was whistled. Xiao Ran must have stood up for Qiao Honkai. Why would he challenge a weakling like Cha Wu? It was simply inexplicable. Compared to the others, Cha Wu's face instantly turned as black as the bottom of a pot when he heard Xiao Ran's words. It was too horrible to look at, and he almost blurted out, "Fuck." Before this, after watching the fight between Xiao Honkai and Meng Tong, especially after hearing Hu Yunfeng's unfair judgment, Cha Wu was actually quite happy in his heart. Of course, he was not stupid enough to challenge Meng Tong. Although Meng Tong was now severely injured, and as long as he challenged Meng Tong, it would be a piece of cake for him to gain 4 points. However, if he really dared to kick Meng Tong while he was down, he would definitely be doomed. He would not even know when he died. However, although he did not plan to kick Meng Tong while he was down, Cha Wu still saw an opportunity in it. It was an opportunity for Meng Tong and Lin Yi to fight each other while he remained aloof. Xiao Honkai and Meng Tong were both injured. In order to stand up for Xiao Honkai, Xiao Ran would directly challenge Meng Tong. When Meng Tong recovered, he would definitely challenge Xiao Ran and Xiao Honkai out of consideration of face and points. This was the ideal scenario in Cha Wu's mind. It had to be known. There were only a total of 18 rounds in the challenge competition. If they kept going back and forth between the cave abodes with low rankings, it was obviously not worth it for strong rookies like Meng Tong. They had to fight to a higher ranking as soon as possible to have a chance to grab more challenge points. Therefore, in theory, Cha Wu's ideal scenario was very likely to become a reality. However, he did not expect that Xiao Ran would give him a hard slap the moment he came up. When Cha Wu saw Xiao Ran's refined and reserved aura of an expert that was as unmoving as a mountain, he nearly teared up. "Fuck, can't you have some brotherly code of brotherhood? Can't you see that Xiao Honkai has just suffered such a huge grievance? Hurry up and step on Meng Tong to avenge him. What kind of bullshit are you trying to do to a weakling like me?" No matter how many profanities he cursed, Cha Wu could only reluctantly walk up to the arena. He had no choice but to accept the challenge. Blue Cloud Pavilion Newcomer Challenge Round 3, Second Match. Cave Abode 15, Xiao Ran. Challenges Cave Abode 14, Cha Wu. Begin. The referee announced. "Please." Xiao Ran did not change his expression and made a gesture. Cha Wu's scalp suddenly went numb. Although he knew that he, as the bottom of the newcomers in Blue Cloud Pavilion, would definitely not be able to defeat Xiao Ran, it was more reliable and safer to admit defeat at this time. However, no matter how weak he was still a heaven stage, great perfection expert. Any cultivator had strong self-esteem. Even a weakling like Cha Wu, who was trampled on by everyone, was no exception. Judging from his previous performance, this Xiao Ran was indeed not simple. However, after all, he had never really fought to the death with anyone. Last time, he was challenged by Meng Tong and even took the initiative to admit defeat. This meant that this guy's strength might not be as strong as everyone thought. Maybe he was just pretending? After all, this Xiao Ran was a guy from the secular world. It was natural that his foundation was not good. The probability of him being a fake was not small at all. It was impossible for every cultivator from the secular world to be as abnormal as Lin Yi, right? If that was really the case, the status of the secular world and Heaven Stage Island would have been changed long ago. Why would this group of people go through so much trouble to come to Heaven Stage Island? Cha Wu still had 4 points. If he could win today's match, not only would he not lose 2 points, he could even earn some points from Xiao Ran. This way, as long as he could make 2 spiritual herb seeds grow in the spiritual herb trial, he would be able to protect his last shred of shame. At least, he would not fall into the negative points and would have a chance of survival. However, if he took the initiative to admit defeat today, there would be no chance of survival. Therefore, no matter what, Cha Wu could only grit his teeth and choose to fight with Xiao Ran. Holding on to this little bit of luck, Cha Wu finally mustered up the courage to attack after taking a deep breath. Compared to Meng Tong, who was in the early stage of the Foundation Establishment realm, even if Cha Wu went all out, his speed could not be said to be fast, let alone give Xiao Ran any pressure. Xiao Ran did not even use the shadow step. He simply moved horizontally and directly avoided his opponent's attack. Then, while his opponent was not able to react, Xiao Ran stretched out his arm and grabbed the back of his opponent's collar. With a little force, Cha Wu's body suddenly flew into the air. When he landed again, he was already outside the ring. According to the rules of the challenge, whoever fell out of the ring, regardless of whether they were injured or not, would lose. This is over. Everyone was instantly dumbfounded. Wasn't it over too quickly? It was true that Cha Wu was a weakling. Chapter 3794. Previously, everyone thought that Xiao Honkai was lumber waste, but in the end, she became an expert in the early stage of the Foundation establishment realm. She even fought with Meng Tong until both of them were injured. Now, this Xiao Ran easily defeated Cha Wu with just one move, and no one could see the depth of his strength. However, with Meng Zhuang's strength and eyesight, it was impossible that he couldn't see it. When Xiao Ran made his move just now, although he didn't show his full strength, Meng Zhuang could clearly feel that this ordinary-looking Xiao Ran was already an expert in the early stage of the Foundation establishment realm, just like lumber waste. Xiao Ran, Xiao Honkai, two experts in the early stage of the Foundation establishment realm, and Lin Yi, the freakishly strong #1 newcomer. In the past, he didn't think that it was anything special, but now that he thought about it, the lineup of these three people was absolutely luxurious. Although outside, including Lin Yi, the three of them could only be considered to be at the beginning stage, and they couldn't be compared to the word awesome, but in the Welcome Pavilion, it was a real dream lineup. Not only was it awesome, it was simply awesome. Even Meng Zhuang, the big brother in charge, who had the chance to be promoted to the position of the third master of the Welcoming Pavilion, couldn't help but feel a headache when he thought of this lineup. Originally, Lin Yi's strength wasn't that scary, but if everyone in the group started to become stronger, things would become very difficult. Not only would it be more difficult to deal with Lin Yi and the other two people together, but more importantly, once the three of them grew stronger, the situation in the future might be reversed. Then, Meng Zhuang, who had repeatedly gone against him, would really come to an end. No, he had to think of a way to nip this danger in the bud as soon as possible. Otherwise, if he didn't kill the snake, there would be endless trouble in the future. Meng Zhuang glanced at Lin Yi and Xiao Ran viciously. Then he looked at Meng Tong, who was seriously injured and lying on the side. He rubbed his chin thoughtfully. Lin Yi, Xiao Ran, and Xiao Honkai. Although the lineup of these three people looked very strong in the Welcome Pavilion, under the protection of the newcomers, they were not as strong as they used to be. It could even be said that they were unsolvable, but it was not impossible to deal with them. At the very least, there was a flaw among the three of them, a fatal flaw. And this flaw was in Xiao Honkai. Don't forget that Meng Tong was seriously injured and in a sorry state. Xiao Honkai, who was injured along with him, was not in a good state either. It was impossible for her to recover within 10 days to half a month. Not only him, but Xiao Ran and Ku by Shi Xiang, who weren't there, thought so as well. After all, it wasn't about quantity but quality. There was only one Miracle Dan doctor, Zhang Liju. If everyone else did the same thing, then the end result would be nothing special. Not only would they not be able to do anything special, but it would also affect the most important part of their strength. It wasn't worth it. Even if I, your boss, am an elixir refiner, I don't know how to make any elixir. Besides, it takes time, right? How can it be as convenient as healing you directly? Besides, it's not a big deal. It's just that my practice is a little special. Lin Yi smiled faintly. Haha, boss, that's easy for you to say. I've been practicing for so many years, and I've never seen anyone heal people like this. This time, I've seen it for myself. No wonder you're our boss, mighty and domineering. You're good at everything. Xiao Honkai praised with a smile. This kid really knew how to flatter people. Lin, he shook his head speechlessly and reminded, remember, Don't tell anyone that I can heal people. It'll cause trouble. That's for sure. Don't worry, boss. An innocent man gets into trouble because of his wealth. I know this very well. I won't tell anyone. Xiao Hongkai promised. Lin Yi nodded in relief and signaled Xiao Hongkai to focus on healing. Time passed, and after 6 hours, Lin Yi finally retracted his qi and ended the healing. Chapter 3796. Although Xiao Hongkai seemed a little reckless, she was not. 3 days passed in a flash, and the 4th round of the newcomer challenge began as scheduled. After the first 3 rounds, especially the 3rd round, where Xiao Hongkai and Meng Tong fought fiercely, the newcomer challenge had clearly entered a white-hot stage. No newcomer would hide. As long as there was the slightest chance, they would definitely pounce out like a hungry wolf to snatch points. It was exciting to watch. However, on the side of Blue Cloud Pavilion, the biggest focus was still on the top 5. To be precise, it was on Meng Tong and Xiao Hongkai. These two had just fought to the death in the last round. In the previous round, Meng Tong and Xiao Hongkai had both been heavily injured. If it had been any other ordinary newcomer present, with such a brutal injury, even if they were lucky enough to survive, they would probably not be able to get up for at least 10 days to half a month. However, what made the newcomers amazed was that after 3 days of recuperation, whether it was Meng Tong or Xiao Hongkai, they were able to move freely like normal people. However, the two of them still looked a little weak, as if they had not fully recovered from their injuries. With the two of them in such a weak state, if it wasn't for the fact that their cave-dwelling rankings were low, the other newcomers might have thought of taking advantage of them. After all, so what if they were early-stage foundation establishment experts? At this time, it was obvious that they were like tigers being bullied by dogs. A sick tiger was not as good as a cat. As the newcomers waited with different thoughts in their minds, the referee finally arrived. The 4th round of the newcomer challenge had officially begun. Xiao Hongkai and Lin Yi looked at each other. Then, under everyone's astonished gaze, they slowly walked onto the stage and pointed at Meng Tong. Come on, great newcomer Meng. You were lucky enough to escape in the last round. Let's continue today. Who will have the last laugh? Xiao Hongkai's challenge to Meng Tong was not unexpected at all. After all, anyone who was treated so unfairly by Xiao Hongkai would not be able to hold back their anger. Naturally, it was better to vent this anger as soon as possible. Otherwise, they would not be able to think clearly. Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, they listened to Xiao Hongkai's declaration of challenge. Meng Jueguang and Meng Tong looked at each other and could not help but laugh sinisterly. I'm not afraid of you challenging me. I'm afraid that you won't dare to challenge me. What none of the rookies present expected was that Meng Tong's weak appearance was just an act for Xiao Hongkai to see. It was to lure him into challenging him. In fact, 2 days ago, because he had consumed a grade 4 great recovery pill given by Meng Jueguang, Meng Tong had already recovered from his injuries. Under everyone's gaze, Meng Tong deliberately pretended to be weak as he walked into the ring with a cold smile. Originally, with his arrogant style, he would not put in so much effort to deal with a guy like Lumberwaist. Not only was it not his style, but it was also embarrassing. Even if he were to pretend, he could remove his disguise the moment Xiao Hongkai took the initiative to challenge him. After all, his opponent had already taken the bait and he had achieved his goal. However, today, Meng Tong acted like a completely different person. Not only did he get Xiao Hongkai to take the bait, he even continued to pretend when he was in the ring. He wanted to take advantage of Xiao Hongkai and end all troubles once and for all. After suffering, this kid has matured a lot. Meng Jueguang could not help but feel gratified. Meng Tong was the right-hand man that he relied on the most. Although his loyalty and strength were not bad, the most fatal problem was that he never used his brain. In the long run, he would at most be a new fighter. He was far from being able to take charge. But now, this guy was finally enlightened. This was a rare and unexpected gain. In Meng Jiuguang's calculations, the financial resources of Lin Yi's group obviously could not be compared to his, who had young Master Su as his backing. Meng Jiuguang and Meng Tong were nearby, and Su Lingqiong and Kong Ming were far away. Even people like Pavilion Master Hu Yinfeng were natural enemies. If Yu Zhe and Nan Tianyong, the supervising deacon of Soaring Sky Pavilion, were added to the mix, how could they continue to mingle in Yingxin Pavilion in the future? No matter how strong Lin Yi was. That was only relative to ordinary rookies. Lin Yi was also a little depressed to be targeted by so many powerful opponents with deep backgrounds. Lin Yi's principle was that he wasn't afraid of anything, but his main goal was to focus on cultivation. It wasn't a battle of wits and courage with this group of people. This was a real crisis. It seemed to be far away, but it was actually right in front of him. If he was a little careless, it could be a disaster in the next few days. After receiving the news from Shanghai Laner, Lin Yi's first reaction was that a long delay would bring trouble. He had to think of a way to divert the attention of these two people as soon as possible. However, how could he divert the attention of these two people? That was another problem. Lin Yi couldn't come into contact with them at the moment. Even if there was a chance to meet them face to face, according to normal people's logic, it would be better to avoid it as much as possible. It was impossible to jump out and meet them face to face. Otherwise, once they came into close contact, he might be discovered. Then he would be walking right into a trap. After all, when one's strength reached the middle stage of the foundation establishment stage, the sensitivity of one's perception was no small matter. However, if he didn't even have the chance to come into contact with them, what could he use to mislead them? This was obviously a paradox. I got it. Lin Yi thought for a moment, and his eyes suddenly lit up. With his current identity as Lin Yi, it really wasn't good to jump out and take the initiative to come into contact with Yu Zhe and Nan Tianyong. Even if he did come into contact with them, it wasn't realistic to divert their attention away from the welcoming pavilion. Since they had locked onto the welcoming pavilion and locked onto the newcomers, they had already eliminated all other possibilities. Trying to mislead them from this angle was even more difficult. Moreover, if the traces of misdirection were too heavy, it would be easy to give them a handle. However, even if he couldn't divert their attention away from the welcoming pavilion, Lin Yi still had a way to make himself disappear from their line of sight without leaving a trace. The reason was very simple. As long as he could find a way to get them to eliminate him from the list of suspects, then no matter how long they stared at the welcoming pavilion in the future, no matter how detailed their investigation was, they wouldn't be able to connect it to him. Because subconsciously, they had already labeled him as impossible. Chapter 38:03. Let them confirm that he was just a simple Lin Yi, and not the Lin Air they were looking for. Subconsciously, they would not think of him as the person they were looking for. Then these so-called flaws on Lin Yi's body would be impossible to talk about. And the most direct and effective way to make the other party have a strong first impression was to find an opportunity to let Yu Zhe and Nan Tianyong come over to take a look at him. Seeing is believing. Ordinary people believe in their eyes far more than their intuition. Even powerful cultivators would find it difficult to change this nature. Before Yu Zhe and Nan Tianyong locked the suspicion on him, let them see his face that was completely different from Lin Er's. Once they took the initiative to cut off the connection between Lin Yi and Lin Er, then the crisis would naturally be solved. However, although this method was simple and effective, if Lin Yi took the initiative to find an opportunity to get close to them, it would be too deliberate and easy to make people suspicious. The best way was to use a third party to lead them to take the initiative to come over. Xiao Bai, wait here for a while. I will write a letter to your master. Help me bring it back later. Lin Yi thought for a moment and comforted the little curly bear who was hanging on him. Then he found a pen and ink and wrote a reply to Shangwan Laner. Yes, the third party that Lin Yi expected was his little senior sister, Shangwan Laner. Although Shangwan Laner was the well-deserved first lady of the three pavilions, with her pure and enthusiastic personality, once Lin Yi asked, she would be happy to help. However, Lin Yi did not think of asking her to take the initiative to find Yu Zhe and Nan Tianyong. After all, her identity was too conspicuous. If she took the initiative to ask this kind of irrelevant gossip, it would be too unreasonable. So, even if he wanted her to help, he had to at least think of a reasonable explanation. He had to borrow the help of others. And around Shangwan Laner, there was such a natural candidate, Su Lingqiong, eldest young Master Su. In the letter, Lin Yi described in detail how he needed Shangwan Laner's help. Only then did he fold the letter and pass it to little Curly Bear. Then he went out and escorted the little Curly Bear back until he entered the inner core area of the Soaring Sky Pavilion. Only then did he leave quietly. After returning to the cave residence at the foot of the mountain, Lin Yi returned to his normal pace as if nothing had happened. During the day, he still went to the Jade Spirit Hall to mine. At night, he infused his true qi into the 85 spiritual herb seeds. Apart from that, he meditated and cultivated. Previously, Lin Yi had planned to go out and purchase some medicinal ingredients in the next few days to refine pills and gain some benefits for Li Zhengming. It was just that this couldn't be compared, as people could increase their strength just by eating a meal. And as Shanghai Laner had expected, young Master Su Lingqiong was indeed not absent. Seeing the figure of Shanghai Laner, all the second-generation cultivators were suddenly collectively stunned. After a moment, they reacted, and one after another, they hurriedly surrounded her to greet her. Don't look at these second-generation cultivators, each and every one of them walking out with their mouths wide open, as if they were the only one in the world, but in front of a young lady like Shanghai Laner, they were not even fart. Who asked her to have such a valiant grandfather like Shanghai Tianhua? Even the elders of their families, in front of her grandfather, could only nod their heads and bow. In front of eldest Miss Shangwan, they could only naturally be a head shorter. And among the crowd, if one were to say that the one who fawned on Shanghai Laner the most was none other than Su Lingqiong. Don't forget that this guy wholeheartedly wanted to become the grandson-in-law of Shanghai Tianhua. At this time, if he still did not know to seize the opportunity to fawn on her, then he was really stupid. Seeing so many second-generation young masters surrounding Shangwan Laner like lapdogs, one of the women in the banquet suddenly became unhappy. She sarcastically said, "Some women really don't understand the rules. Relying on the little background of their family, they bring a broken spiritual pet to wander around. This is Huayang residence, and anyone who casually enters and leaves is either rich or noble. Is this a place where a broken spiritual pet like you can come?" You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.